Chapter 14:18. That's the target of this mission, Sylvie realized. The scene in the center of the continent was almost identical to the information provided by His Majesty. The city of demons was built around the obelisk, and there was a deep pit between the obelisk and the city. Countless low-level demons were attached to it, like parasitic worms on the surface of a tree. But upon closer inspection, one would discover that they were continuously digging at the rock wall, causing the pit to expand. The red mist settled here, forming a red lake, and the towers near the walls of the pit would fall into the lake one after another, becoming part of the giant pit. Rumor had it that the obelisk was not this huge from the start, and that it would break out of the ground like a living creature, continuously growing, and the pit that contained the red mist would also continue to expand. Thus, one could determine the age of a demon's city from these 2 points. The city in front of them was undoubtedly shockingly ancient. Compared to the target, the figure of the biplane could only be described as insignificant. Not to mention the bombs it carried. Even if it plunged into the pit, it would be hard to imagine that it could ignite the red mist lake. Suddenly, Sylvie let out a soft "ah." "What's wrong?" the attentive Vendi asked immediately. "I discovered a strange demon." A demon that appeared at the top of the obelisk attracted her attention. Based on the habits of demons that worshipped the sky, those that could reach the top of the obelisk would definitely not be ordinary. And from the appearance of the other party, it was clearly not an ordinary demon. It was wearing a large cloak that could cover 3 or 4 people, and it was covered with densely packed ornaments. When she got closer, she could see that there were all kinds of things, from bone knives to metal armor, and even a few screws. The enemy's head was also very special. It looked like a pillar, and there were many masks hanging on it, inexplicably giving people goosebumps. Is its magical wave very strong? No, it's not strong. This was what puzzled Sylvie the most. Judging from its appearance, it was at least a senior demon, but after it appeared, it did not leap into the air, nor did it intend to gather mana to activate its ability. The only thing it did was to focus its attention on the direction where the Sky Knight was fighting. It did not intend to participate in the battle at all. Since it did not pose a threat to everyone, Sylvie did not pay too much attention to it. Now that the 2 Heaven's Wrath teams were nearing the edge of the city, she had to focus to accurately determine the best place to drop the bombs. 2 minutes later, she sent out the bombing order over the radio. A small team can drop the bombs. Good understands. Even on a sunny day, the clouds above the impassable mountain range wouldn't be too high. Coupled with the height of the stronghold itself, it allowed the fury of heaven to remain undetected by the enemy. The 5 biplanes lined up in a row, and with a steady speed, they dropped the 150-kilogram bombs mounted on their bellies. The moment the heavy projectile left the hook, Good felt the body of the projectile suddenly lift up, as if his body had become much lighter. Unfortunately, he couldn't see the results of this battle with his own eyes. But Sylvie could see it very clearly. As the center of gravity of the 5 bombs was in front, they quickly turned their heads downwards. Using the inertia of the planes, they fell in a rapid arc towards the center of the city. In the last 500 meters, they were almost perpendicular to the ground. And the demons had also noticed these uninvited guests from the sky. Another group of devil beasts rose from the city and flew towards the clouds. But compared to the speed of the bombs, their movements paled in comparison. 5 black shadows rushed into the city, and the moment the bombs touched the ground, they turned into a scorching fireball. The smoke and gravel it brought up were tens of meters high, and the momentum far exceeded that of a 152 mm grenade. Even though Sylvie couldn't hear the sound, she could feel the earth-shattering shock from the violent explosion and the flying debris around her. At the same time, under the high heat wave, a few clear holes appeared in the red mist, just like the air holes in fluffy bread. Looking from above, the slowly spreading grayish-black smoke column was particularly eye-catching in the red mist. Perhaps this city had rarely been attacked in the past hundreds of years, but from the moment it broke into the impassable mountain range until today, the core area had been visited by humans twice in less than half a month. However, Sylvie's heart sank to the bottom. Due to the influence of the wind, although the impact points of the bombs were quite wide, at least they fell into the city, which was much more accurate than the Longsong cannons. But only 2 of them hit the red mist lake, and neither of them made contact with the lake surface before exploding directly in the air. The moment the fireball appeared, she saw a rippling blue light wave. It was just like the barrier on the senior demons. What happened? Vendi noticed her strange expression. There's a magic barrier around the obelisk, Sylvie murmured. The bombs didn't have any effect. Hey. Shavi turned her head in disbelief. You mean the demons expanded the barrier to the level of a city? How is that possible? Of course, she knew it was a little unbelievable. The effect of an ability was usually related to the total amount of magic power. To make it effective in such a large area, even all the witches combined would not be able to do it. But the truth was right in front of her, and she had to believe it. That's right, the senior demon at the top of the tower. As the thought popped up in her mind, Sylvie saw the demon again. But this time it made her hair stand on end, and an indescribable feeling welled up in her heart. She saw that the demon had stretched out 7 or 8 skinny arms and taken off all the masks on its head, revealing an extremely distorted face. More than a dozen stacked heads looked up into the sky, among which there were demons, humans, and some unknown monsters. One of the faces of a woman was particularly glaring. They all showed different smiles, which could be said to be extremely strange. Sylvie could not hold it in any longer, and she bent over and vomited, and her ability was interrupted. Seeing this, Vendi immediately picked up the communicator. This is Seagull. Team 2, drop the bombs immediately and turn back. Understood. Did Team 1's bombing succeed? No, there's a magic barrier around the obelisk, and the bombs didn't enter the deep pit. Barrier? The other end was silent for a moment. I got it. But I want to try again. But something happened here, and I'm afraid Sylvie can't give you any more instructions for the time being. Moreover, the enemy's devil beasts are approaching the clouds. Don't worry, Team 1 will cover us. Vendi had no choice but to contact Tilly and report the situation. The latter did not mind at all. It's okay, let Team 2 try. We're not at the point of retreat yet. Chapter 14:19. At the same time, Good also received a message from the captain of Team 2. This is Manfeld. Senior Good, I want to fly out of the clouds. I hope you can help me. Fly out of the clouds? Are you crazy? This is the enemy's base camp. Before Good could reply, Finken's roar came through the communicator. And you heard it. There's a barrier above the sea of fog. What can you do? Newbie, the battlefield is not a place for you to joke around. As the most advanced modified biplane, the Fury of Heaven was equipped with a radio. This was also the reason why the 10 planes dared to fly through the clouds without Tilly's guidance. Good did not directly refuse. He was more curious about Manfeld's intentions than his seniority in the academy. I heard your request, Manfeld. But even if you can see the target, you should also know that without Lady Sylvie's calibration, the chances of hitting the target are slim. Good had already noticed this talented student during training. It was said that Manfeld was a down-and-out knight who came to Grey Castle because he could no longer survive in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Many empty knights who were born as commoners often called themselves seniors in front of him. This was also to vent their dissatisfaction at being oppressed by the nobles. To be honest, Good did not have a good impression of the knight of the kingdom of Wolfheart. They seemed arrogant and domineering, but when they encountered a truly strong enemy, they would usually run away faster than anyone else. Good had witnessed this kind of ugliness countless times when the Church of Hermes invaded the kingdom of Wolfheart. It was Good's first time seeing a knight like Manfeld who took the initiative to fight. Therefore, he wanted to know whether Manfeld was deliberately showing off in front of Her Highness Tilly, or if he was really different from the rest. Senior, do you still remember how we used the body of the plane to control the trajectory of the bullets when we strafed? Manfeld replied. I think it should work on the bombs too. As soon as Manfeld finished speaking, the buzzing sound on the other side suddenly became softer, as though the surroundings had suddenly become much more spacious. This guy has flown out of the clouds, Finken exclaimed. What should we do? Using the fuselage to control the dropping of the bomb. Good quickly realized the similarities. He coughed twice. We can't just leave Team 2 alone. Her Highness Tilly is watching from the side. Ahaha, you're right. Finkin paused for a moment and then said in a righteous tone, I'm good at protecting my teammates. Rest assured. Team 1 will deal with the devil beasts. Yeehaw. It was really easy to understand. Good side and pushed the control stick forward. The two groups leaped out of the clouds from different positions and swooped down, leaving two thin marks on the dome. At the same time, they formed a countercurrent to the devil beasts that were climbing upwards. Compared to the large number of the latter, although the fury of heaven roars were few in number, they gave off an indomitable aura. One group took a turn and collided head-on with the devil beasts, while the other group headed straight for the obelisk. At this distance, even without Sylvie's guidance, they would be able to locate the target with their naked eyes. Along the way, a portion of the demons attempted to intercept the 5 fury of heaven roars, but the difference in speed was obvious. The moment the devil beasts turned into level flight, they were left behind by the biplanes that brushed past them. As long as they did not initiate an aerial battle, even a fury of heaven roar with 150 kilograms of bombs was not something that the devil beasts could catch up to. After adjusting his direction several times, Manfeld dropped the bombs. His teammates followed suit. The bombs that left their hooks maintained a similar speed and path as the planes. They flew past the densely packed towers and high walls and headed straight for the red mist lake. Compared to dropping bombs from high altitude, these 5 bombs landed more closely together. Other than one being blocked by the obelisk, the remaining 4 detonated directly above the red mist lake. The successive explosions caused the entire city to tremble. Beneath the flames that soared into the sky, blue light flashed repeatedly. From start to finish, the red mist lake did not suffer the slightest impact. However, everyone noticed that the radiance was no longer as bright as it was at the beginning. Not bad, newbie. Finkin whistled. Good rolled away from the pursuit of the devil beasts and switched to the general channel. Reporting to Your Highness Tilly. Team 1 and 2 have completed their bombing mission. Requesting to return. Understood. Permission granted. The Phoenix quickly shot out a red signal flare. The fleet that was engaged in battle with the demons began to ascend. With the help of the dazzling sunlight, they disappeared into the blue sky. Mask let out a satisfied sigh. These humans were getting more and more out of his expectations. Splitting into 2, with the main force feigning an attack and retreating after striking without any delay. From the time the defense forces took to the skies to the end of the battle, only a short period of 30 minutes had passed. Such a flexible battle plan had undoubtedly maximized the strengths of the war machines. It was no wonder that Osrook was fearful of the humans. It seemed like he had wronged Osrook back then. But even the genius commander of the race only saw the threat, and did not realize the essence of the mystery. On the other hand, even the clumsy and slow humans could travel freely in the sky with the help of the iron birds. Wouldn't it be even more astonishing if it were used on the race? When the time came, the Sky-Sea realm would no longer be an enemy that was difficult to deal with. The race would definitely be invincible. If Osrook had used such a reason to convince everyone, he might have stood on the other party's side. What a pity. What was that tremor just now? The door at the top of the tower opened as the armored silent disaster slowly walked out. Did the deity of gods suffer an attack? That's right, but you came a little late and did not make it in time for the exciting battle. Nasapel glanced at her. Speaking of which, are you dressed to fight? It's best you don't force yourself. It's none of your business. Silent Disaster replied softly. Where are the enemies? Nasapel pointed to the sky. They have probably discovered that the difference between the iron birds and the bogle beasts has become the most obvious breakthrough point for both sides. How ironic. During the second battle of divine will, this hard-to-obtain demonic body was the greatest asset for our race to obtain victory. Silent Disaster looked at the sky without a word and had an ugly expression. Don't worry. Nasapel wore the mask back on his face. After this observation, I have already thought of a countermeasure. Compared to the bogle beasts, their movements are too obvious. Right, since you desire battle so much. Why don't you do me a favor? Don't be so serious, I'm not mocking you. Mask spread out his numerous arms. Previously, a few iron birds crashed to the southeast of the city. If the worms on them are still alive, capture them. I believe such a small matter shouldn't be too difficult for you. They have to be alive. Silent Disaster asked coldly. Of course. Nasapel laughed delightedly. Only fresh brains have the value of transplantation. Furthermore, they have just experienced an intense battle and have the most distinct impression of flying. They are the best tools for me to verify my countermeasure. This is the first time I'm absorbing the brains of ordinary worms. I wonder which lucky person will obtain this honor? Silent Disaster looked away in disgust and turned to walk towards the birth tower. Nasapel turned back without a care. He knew that no matter how much Silent Disaster disliked the method, he would do his best for the race. Mask looked at the distant human territory and slowly extended his palm forward. From this angle, it looked like he could grasp the entire continent in his palm with one hand. In a few more days, the deity of gods would enter the Hermes Highlands. The tens of thousands of symbiotic demons in the experimental grounds were ready to go. He wanted to let the king see that he alone could fight against an army. Be it bloodshed or Silent Disaster, they were just a foil to him. Suddenly, a light flashed in the distance. It came extremely quickly and disappeared just as quickly. Although the light was small, it was extremely bright, almost to the point of being glaring. It was like the reflection of the sun on the ocean, or the reflection of light from a mirror. Was that an illusion? Nasapel was taken aback. By the time he carefully looked in the direction of the Sea of Vortexes, the light had disappeared. Chapter 1420. By the way, is there anyone playing Invisible Guardian? Will stop updating for a day to tidy up the plot. Currently in the middle of typing, please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1421. It was drizzling on the shore of Gemini Bay in the Kingdom of Dawn. Agatha did not know whether it was a coincidence or a result of the test explosion. The violent explosion set off a magnificent water column on the surface of the sea, which could be seen from 15 kilometers away. Different from the grayish-blue background, the rising water column was pure white, as if it did not belong to the sea. The water column rose slowly as if it had become weightless. The whole process lasted for dozens of seconds, which was beyond the common sense of most onlookers. In the end, it turned into raindrops and returned to the sea, replaced by a twisted white mist, which was larger and higher than the water column. Until now, the strange smoke cloud could still be seen. As for the sailboats that had gathered around the test explosion site, they were long gone. It was at this moment that the rain started. It had always been her regret that she could not participate in the first test explosion on the snow mountain. Now she could finally make up for it. Agatha could not help but think of the conversation between His Majesty and Phyllis after the artillery demonstration in Neverwinter 2 years ago. The exothermic reaction between chemical materials was just the lowest level of explosion. His goal was to recreate the glory of the sun. Putting aside the nonsense about radiant radiation, His Majesty was generally quite reliable. What surprised her was that there was no applause from the audience this time. The invited nobles sat in their chairs in a daze, as if they had forgotten to whisper to each other. Many of them had complicated expressions, and even a hint of fear flashed in their eyes. As the representative of Grey Castle, Agatha had prepared a long speech according to Roland's instructions, but after seeing this scene, she immediately stood up and left the audience. She could completely guess what these people were thinking. Sometimes silence could explain everything. In any case, His Majesty had fulfilled his promise. The attending nobles of the Kingdom of Dawn had witnessed the ability of human beings with their own eyes. The following data collection was naturally handled by the Ministry of Industry. In less than half an hour, the preliminary conclusion was sent to her. The test explosion had achieved the desired effect. Agatha tied the note that read, "Everything goes well," to the flying messenger, and threw it into the sky. The messenger spread its wings and quickly disappeared into the western horizon. I hope the air raids on the other side are going well, she thought. In the castle of the City of Glow, the General Staff Department was sorting out the latest intelligence brought by the air raid. The outcome of the attack was extremely ideal. The demons probably did not expect the humans to launch a new attack so quickly after their defeat at the impassable mountain range. coupled with the Air Knight's innate agility, the demons only reacted when the aircrafts approached the deity of gods. This meant that the demons had the ability to make the land within a radius of dozens of kilometers fly, but they did not have the ability to completely monitor the area. This not only gave the First Army an idea, but also gave the Seagull the opportunity to record the positions of all the devil beasts. Unlike biplanes, the devil beasts did not need a flat, open space to take off and land. But for now they were still being bred together, and would be under unified command during wartime. Therefore, the large black stone pagoda where the devil beasts resided was undoubtedly a worthy target. The magic barrier above the mist lake was the most crucial piece of information. Not only did the Air Knight discover its existence, he even confirmed through continuous bombardments that it could be weakened. Although the principle was unclear, the characteristic was similar to the barrier that the senior demons usually possessed, just that the range was much larger. If they could establish a connection between the two, the General Staff Department would be able to calculate the amount of firepower needed to break through the barrier. Compared to the above information, the loss of 4 Fire of Heaven aircrafts was considered a small price to pay. Manfeld Castian. Roland put down the battle report and sighed. He is indeed worthy of a commendation. It was not difficult to be determined. What was difficult was to be determined and have the ability to carry it out. Breaking into the sky above the demon city, relying on his own understanding to complete the dive and drop the bombs, and finally leading his teammates to escape safely, this talent could only be described as outstanding. I will pass on the commendation to him. Tilly shrugged and whispered. But I have never seen him. What? No, it's nothing. I still have things to do. So I will take my leave first. Tilly turned and walked out of the room. Roland heard Nightingale chuckle behind him. Did you hear what she said? No. Nightingale pursed her lips. But I can basically guess. Oh, tell me about it? She gestured 5 fingers. So many? Roland was surprised. Who asked her to be the Princess Royal Highness? This is already a discount. All right, deal. Nightingale licked her lips happily. That Air Knight's talent is indeed not bad, but you have praised him too much. Among all the Air Knights, isn't it obvious who is the most talented? You seem to take things that can be done for granted, but it is not the case for the person involved. At this point, she paused slightly. After all, this is not something we can choose, right? Indeed, ability is also a kind of talent. Roland sat by the window of the Rose Café, looking out into the bustling streets in a daze. Although the starting point was high, to fully unleash it required a large amount of hard work. He had indeed neglected this point recently. Hey, what are you daydreaming about? Roland retracted his gaze and saw Valkyrie sitting opposite him with 2 cups of coffee. Of course I'm thinking about how to quickly reach the bottomless land. He temporarily cast aside the distracting thoughts in his mind, and roughly described the process of the air raid on the deity of gods. Is this magic barrier that can cover a large area related to the abilities of the senior demons? Is it also a recently developed technology? If I were you, I wouldn't use the term demon. Valkyries replied unhappily. My race's specific abilities depend on the type of magic stone. The shield magic stone was chosen because of its good compatibility and high practicality. It is not a necessary ability. For example, I did not fuse with such a magic stone. In addition, no matter what, the magic stone's range cannot cover the entire birth tower. It should be another result of Mask's research. What's that? Valkyries drank a mouthful of coffee. Using the core instrument to simulate the cyclone structure of the magic stone, to achieve a large increase in the effects. This idea has been around for a long time, but there are many practical obstacles. I never expected it to succeed. This also meant that the barrier that appeared on the deity of gods was essentially the same as their abilities. Roland silently noted this point down. At the very least, it proved that the idea proposed by the General Staff was feasible. The one who developed the symbiotic demons was also Mask? That's right. In a certain sense, he is very similar to the Transformer Heathdelis. He has never used a single magic stone for combat. Valkyries nodded. Considering that the symbiotic demons aren't ideal in dealing with the Sky Sea realm, It is logical for the king to send him. After the two chatted about the current situation, Nightmare Lord stood up and bade farewell. When he sent him to the door, Roland suddenly said, "Thank you." The latter stopped in surprise. Haxor did not appear in the two recent battles. He probably believed the contents of the letter. If he had been present, the First Army's losses would have been much higher. At least on this point, I should be thanking you. Don't forget, I'm not helping you, but my race. Valkyries turned back. If you can keep your promise, it will be the best reward. Other than that, I don't need any gratitude. Then he quickly disappeared into the crowd. When Roland returned to the coffee shop, his cell phone suddenly rang. It was an express delivery text message. This made Roland feel a little strange. He clearly hadn't bought anything online recently. Even so, he returned to the apartment and rummaged through the box for the package that was sent to him. The package was about half an arm's length and was almost weightless in his hands. It did not match the size of the cardboard box at all. Roland checked the seal, and after confirming that it was indeed sent to him, he opened the package in his bedroom. The moment he opened the box, he was stunned. Inside was a solidified astrolabe. Chapter 1422. How could it be an astrolabe? Roland took a long time to recover from his shock. Unlike the core of a fallen evil, such an object would only appear in the bodies of pure magic creatures and oracles. Ordinary martialists were no match for it. If the Martialist Association gathered their strength and planned meticulously, they might have a chance to kill such an enemy, but they would definitely not hand over the astrolabe so casually. Using express delivery to deliver a dangerous object that could infect and corrode others at any time was almost child's play. But if it was not sent by the association, who could have done it? Roland checked the address and phone number. Both were fabricated, and the only trustworthy thing was the odd number, which indicated that it came from the same city. It was obvious that the sender did not want him to know his identity. The problem was that this was not a wise move by the other party. The express delivery company did not verify the sender's identity to reduce costs, and it would be easy for them to find out the truth. Could they hide their tracks by fabricating an address? In modern society, this was almost impossible. By investigating the surveillance cameras and interrogating the courier, they would be able to lock onto the target very quickly. But Roland was hesitant to use the association's power to track down the sender. From the results, it was obvious that the other party knew his background and had a certain degree of goodwill towards him. Otherwise, they would not have sent such a troublesome object to the apartment. No matter what, the person who helped him weaken the corrosive power should be on the same side. Since the other party did not wish to be exposed, it might be better for him to maintain the status quo. Roland rubbed his forehead and decided to think about this problem later. The most important thing now was to deal with the astrolabe in front of him. He shifted his attention back to the box. If the astrolabe came from the rift monster, he could directly fuse with it. But if it came from the oracles, wouldn't that mean no? How could that be possible? Roland laughed involuntarily. It was already very exaggerated to be able to kill the rift monster, and the oracles were not so easy to deal with. Even Fei Yuhan could only bitterly hold on, so it was better for him not to daydream about such a beautiful thing. He placed his hand on the astrolabe. The latter seemed to have been revived from the stillness of time. The blue and white spots of light began to spin again, and the center grew brighter and brighter, until a dazzling pillar of light burst out. At this point, everything was normal, and it was exactly the same as the fusion he had witnessed several times. But in the next second, the world suddenly fell into darkness, and a large amount of consciousness surged into his mind like a tide. At the same time, it brought with it unbearable pain. Under the raging waves, Roland almost lost consciousness. It took him a lot of effort to stabilize his mind. When everything slowly calmed down, he opened his eyes again and found himself standing in a void. The snowflakes were still there, but after experiencing it for the third time, his brain seemed to be better able to filter out the irrelevant noises. Alright, it was actually true. It seemed that he had to investigate the other party's identity. The corner of his mouth twitched as he looked around. This time, it's still the universe background? Because the surroundings were too empty, he couldn't be sure. Compared to the consciousness fragments he had experienced the last time, it was obviously darker this time, as if the stars were hidden. It took Roland quite a while to find a reference point among the sparse snowflakes. It was a dim ball of light that looked like it was about to be extinguished, and it was as small as the tip of a needle embedded in the black background. Following this point, he found even more balls of light. When he saw this, he wasn't sure if he was in the universe. Because the light clusters were arranged neatly and spaced evenly, it didn't look like something natural celestial bodies could do. Let me ask you, what is gravity? Just as Roland was looking around with his eyes wide open, a voice suddenly sounded behind him, causing his hair to stand on end. He suddenly turned around, only to notice that there was a gray shadow there. The other party was erratic, as if it didn't have a physical body. Obviously, this wasn't any language that he was familiar with, and it was even hard to determine whether it was a language or not. Although he didn't understand the reason, he realized that the content reflected in his mind had been simplified. It was as if the other party had sent out a complicated electromagnetic wave, but most of it had been filtered by a filter, leaving only the content that he could understand. Are you asking me? Roland asked carefully. Gravity is the most revered force in this world. Yes, replied another voice in his mind, and this one sounded familiar. Roland couldn't help but roll his eyes. First, the sudden appearance shocked him, and then the mysterious question. He thought that he was also involved in this fragment, but he didn't expect that he was just a bystander. That's right, it's calm and stable, and the more magnificent, the stronger. It allows the moment to condense, and the nothingness to take form. Only then can life take root, and civilization survive. The voice gradually became rhythmic, as if it was singing loudly. And the first force that every race recognized was gravity. It was both a cradle and a shackle. The history of civilization's progress was a history of resistance to get rid of gravity. From leaving the earth and flying into the sky, to going to a faraway place, it's all the same. Now it has once again become our obstacle, and also the last obstacle. The risk is unpredictable. I don't recommend implementing the gateway plan. Every step forward is accompanied by risk, you should know this. I know. So my suggestion has never changed from the beginning. But you still helped me complete it. The gray figure flickered twice. For this plan, I have waited for thousands of years. Now let it begin. Wait, what was the gateway plan? What did the last obstacle mean? Roland felt that he seemed to have missed some important information. But no matter how he opened his mouth or thought about it, no matter how he asked, the other party didn't respond to his call. I understand. As the voice in his mind fell, more snowflakes appeared. Based on past experience, when the fragment was nearing its end, the flow of time should have accelerated, but without any reference, it was difficult for him to make an accurate judgment. Roland saw that the light clusters began to move toward the center, but their brightness did not increase but decreased, and soon it became pitch black. The rest of the light clusters flew into the darkness like moths to a flame, without the slightest pause. It was impossible to calculate how many converged in the end. The process seemed to happen in an instant, but also seemed to be extraordinarily long. Finally, as if a limit had been broken, a dazzling red light suddenly bloomed in the darkness, and in the blink of an eye, it swept across the entire world. Its speed was far faster than light, and by the time Roland reacted, it had already completed its sweep, and everything returned to its original state. But Roland knew that this world was completely different. A drastic change was happening. The first to respond was the gray figure. It disintegrated like mist under the light. Then came more death information. They happened in every corner of the darkness. Countless annihilation and withering occurred one after another. Roland couldn't see this scene with his eyes, but it was reflected in his mind. The city in the distance burned, the orbit around the planet fell apart, the fish in the stream stopped swimming, the insects in the cave rotted into a pool of filth. Even his body, which was floating in the void, began to change and distort. At this moment, there was no difference whether life was of a high or low level. The snowflakes also occupied his entire vision at this moment. When everything was over, the scene of the bedroom reappeared in his eyes. Roland endured the strong discomfort, gritted his teeth and moved to the window. The warm afternoon sun shone on him, and the lively street below made him heave a sigh of relief. Only then did he realize that his cheeks seemed to be a little wet. He probed it with his finger, and it was a line of tears. Chapter 14:23. Damn it. Roland took a deep breath and raised his hand to wipe his cheeks. This feeling was a little too real. But he knew that he was only pretending to be relaxed to hide the surging negative emotions in his heart. Even now, his hands were still trembling slightly, and his back was wet and cold. Just now, he felt as if he had personally experienced an extremely terrifying disaster. Even though it was only a short moment, he felt as if he had accompanied those dying lives and civilizations through their final stages. Or rather, he was one of them. From fish and insects to birds and beasts, from low to high, their struggling figures and cries of pain lingered, as if the entire universe had become a land of death. These tears were shed for them. For a moment, Roland even felt a little reluctant to leave the sunlight that shone in through the window. The originally ordinary scene outside the window had now become especially moving. Even the dirty water flowing by the wall, and the dogskin advertisements that could be seen everywhere appeared vivid and natural. Looking at the messy and busy streets for a long time, he finally managed to calm his emotions. Now he could basically confirm one thing. Magic power did not exist in this world from the beginning. This guess had been raised by Anna in the second act, and now it was confirmed. It was the gateway plan that caused the appearance of magic power. But without a doubt, that was not the outcome that the interlocutor wanted. The gray shadow hoped to escape the gravitational pull, and the other party even directly mentioned unpredictable risks. Now it seemed that magic power was an accident that they did not expect, and the catastrophe caused by magic power became the so-called price of the gods. In the end, this power spread in an extremely short period of time, and the interlocutor was not able to escape. The entire world became what he saw now. However, Roland realized that even though he understood all this, what he knew was still superficial. The most important question was, what exactly was the gateway plan, and why was the gray shadow so obsessed with it? What did the Battle of Divine Will have to do with all this? They couldn't be expecting them to fill in this loophole, right? He turned his head and stared at the delivery box for a long time before finally picking up his phone. Hello, Mr. Rock. I need the association to help me find someone. Neverwinter, the entrance to the Fertile Plains, Station 2. A train slowly stopped in front of the loading dock. Buddy, I'll be going first. Without waiting for the train to come to a complete stop, Charms excitedly jumped onto the platform. Hey, you brat, you can't just let me fill the boiler alone, right? Please, please. Tonight's ale is on me. He quickly ran towards the cargo carriage, leaving Hank's voice behind him. After the end of the tequila campaign, Charms did not become a formidable and handsome military officer as he had imagined. Even though his father and his elder brother who had sacrificed themselves had received His Majesty's commendations and honors, the administrative office transferred him and his father out of the First Army and transferred them to full-time train drivers. His father did not have any objections. After all, after the war, someone would still need to drive the train. Even if this powerful machine did not carry artillery, it still had a wide range of uses. Even after the main force retreated to Neverwinter, the number of vehicles on the Fertile Plains did not decrease. The administrative office used this reason to transfer them out of the army. In his father's words, he was serving His Majesty no matter where he went. Furthermore, his treatment was much better than before. However, Charms was not so happy. How could dealing with black coal every day compare to wielding a spear and fighting monsters? Furthermore, his elder brother had sacrificed himself in the battle to defend the camp. He had to go to the front lines and kill a few demons to avenge his elder brother. Serving a steam locomotive was not enough to do that. What he was most vexed about was that his second brother was not affected at all. Not only was he promoted smoothly, he was even selected to join the elite troops of the First Army. This was a little too unfair. Charms originally thought that he would have to spend the next few years sullenly in this desolate wilderness, but he never expected that the development of the situation would completely exceed his expectations. Large numbers of residences and farms sprung up like bamboo shoots after a spring rain in the north of the impassable mountain range. The number of stations increased exponentially, while taverns and shops followed suit. Transporting goods was no longer a boring job, and if he finished early, he could go to a tavern for a few drinks every day. Being a train driver was undoubtedly a popular occupation. Regardless of whether it was a native or a migrant, everyone was filled with interest towards the forbidden land that was once known as the Cursed Land. When one was in high spirits, they did not even need to fork out money for a refill. Of course, this treatment was no different in Neverwinter or other stations. What he was truly looking forward to was the people here. Everyone, please line up and receive your puppets in an orderly manner. Next to the truck, a girl covered her mouth with her hands and shouted. Before he could get close, the other party had already seen him and waved happily. You're here. Looking at that adorable smile, Charms felt that it was truly great to be a train driver. I'm here to help as well. He rolled up his sleeves. All right, then you can carry a puppet with you. The girl smiled as she handed over a doll made of straw and tiptoed to hang it around his neck. Humph, you're unaccountably solicitous. Another girl jumped down from the pile of goods and glared at him coldly. Charms stared back without backing down, and the two of them stared at each other in a deadlock by the side of the carriage. In the end, it was the girl who broke the standoff. All right, Balshan, Mr. Charms is just being warm-hearted. Didn't we have his help when we got lost? At the mention of getting lost, the girl's expression stiffened. She turned her head away and snorted in disdain. I can't be bothered to bicker with you today. Move aside, I have to get to work. With that, she grabbed 2 bags of seeds and walked towards the yard without looking back. My apologies. The girl bowed in embarrassment. Balshan is just... It's all right, I don't mind. Charms feigned magnanimity as he waved his hand and followed behind with the seeds. In fact, he had been looking forward to this day for a long time, and had even prepared his script countless times. There would be a new play in Neverwinter's theater tonight, and he had already booked 2 tickets. All he needed to do was to finish his work and invite the other party. These 2 girls were both witches of the sleeping spell. Their acquaintance could be said to be extremely dramatic. The first time the girl took the train to assist in the construction of station number 2, she accidentally took the wrong seat. Looking at the vast and empty plains, she was at a loss of what to do and cried like a pear blossom in the rain. Balshan, who was by her side, did not fare any better. Faced with an unfamiliar and desolate environment, she revealed a highly vigilant and fearful expression, as though she was a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Left with no choice, Charms could only stop the train and send the 2 back to another train. After repeatedly reminding the driver of their destination, the 2 of them successfully arrived at station number 2 before the sky turned dark. He originally thought that it was an accident and that they would not cross paths again, but he did not expect the 2 witches to be assisting in the unloading of the station. As time went by, they gradually became familiar with each other, and he also found out her name, Dusk. Chapter 1424. Dusk was adorable. It wasn't just her looks. Of course, her looks were outstanding, and there weren't any witches that were lacking. Even Balshan, who always treated him coldly, couldn't be described as ugly. Sometimes, when she put on a straight face, there was a unique flavor to her. But Charms would never say it out loud. Undoubtedly, he would only be met with even more coldness. Dusk's adorableness lay in other aspects. She would smile when she was happy and cry when she met with setbacks. She never hid her emotions and thoughts, and was as pure as a spring in the snow. But she was exceptionally persistent in certain aspects. For example, in the week after she got lost, she waited by the platform for him to appear, just to thank him properly. In short, everything was fine. Dusk was different from all the ladies he had seen before. She was the most unique one, and if the others were black and white, she would definitely be orange-red, just like her curly red hair. In comparison, Balshan paled in comparison. Both of them were witches. Hey, don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. Charms discovered Balshan waiting for him at the entrance of the depot. You should know that we're witches, right? From the first day we met. He retorted. So you're admitting that you're just playing around? Balshan frowned. I don't know why you would have such thoughts, but Dusk is so adorable, and I have no reason to give her to anyone else. If it was in front of Dusk, Charms would never dare to say such words. But in front of Balshan, he didn't want to back down, and he seemed to be able to blurt out any bold words. Balshan probably didn't expect him to admit it directly, and she was stunned for a moment. But what adorableness, that's not important. She's a witch, and it's impossible for a witch to. It's not like you don't know that. So what? Charms puffed out his chest and displayed the war hero emblem on his clothes. I still have an older brother, and even if I can't bear a child, father won't mind. And this emblem was personally given by His Majesty, and it's enough to ensure her future. Do you have any more questions? Balshan was dumbfounded. After a long while, she said angrily, Verbal promises don't count. I'll keep my eyes on you and expose you. Whatever. Charms shrugged his shoulders. Oh right, if you didn't mention that you are a witch, I would have forgotten. What exactly is your ability? Why do I feel like you're just using your own strength to move the goods? For some reason, as soon as he said this, he felt that the other party's expression became even worse. Do you think that I shouldn't be here? No. I'm just curious. Charms hurriedly waved his hands. Only then did he realize that his words were indeed filled with sarcasm. Strange. He was usually very careful with his words. Why did he become so casual now? Although the other party was unreasonable, he was not a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Just as he thought that she would not reply, Balshan said softly, My ability is to kill. Charms inhaled a breath of cold air. What? The latter picked up a seed from the ground and placed it on his palm. Soon, the seed withered and shrunk at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it turned into a dark brown lump. Any life form will wither upon contact just like this seed. In fact, it's not only plants and animals, even rocks and metals will be affected. However, it takes a long time and consumes a lot of magic power, which is why it is usually used to deal with enemies. Charms took 2 steps back. Then why didn't you fight the demons? The Witch Union did not approve of it. They are in charge of all the work arrangements for the witches, and my ability can only be used in close proximity. They felt that it was too dangerous and difficult to use it. In the end, they gave me a choice, apart from going to the battlefield. Balshan gave a self-deprecating laugh. So verbal promises are nothing. His Majesty is no exception. Nonsense. Charms could not accept someone slandering His Majesty in front of him. His Majesty has never gone back on his words. This is something that everyone in Neverwinter can see. Even if it is impossible, as long as His Majesty agrees, it will definitely come true. Looking at the other party's expression, he suddenly lost his confidence. Wait a minute, you've met His Majesty? I have. Balshan threw away the black lump in her hand. This is how the Witch Union arranges the work. They will first select the witches based on their abilities, then ask for the opinions of the witches, and finally make a decision based on the 2 factors. For example, Dusk. If the use of the ability is unclear, it will be handed over to His Majesty to handle. After all, according to him, any ability can be of use in the development of Grey Castle. And there is no such thing as a useless ability. She paused for a moment. And I belong to the latter. Charms found himself in a dilemma. He racked his brains but could not think of any use for such a pure destructive ability other than in battle. His Majesty must have been extremely vexed at that time. But he did not feel that it was His Majesty's fault, and admitting it was worse than failing to fulfill his promise. What did His Majesty say? He said that in another 50 to 100 years, I will be able to shine in the visual effects and props industry. Balshan curled her lips. What is that? Who knows? I think it has something to do with the magic movie, but I'm not too sure either. His Majesty said a lot back then. For example, visual effects have a wide range of uses, and making old products is an indispensable part of industrial visual effects. She walked towards the platform with flagging interest. What a cunning way of putting it, right? Even if he didn't lie, that will be something that will happen many years later. But for now, I am indeed a useless person. So that's what happened. Charms came to a realization. He finally understood why Dusk was hesitant to speak. When the witches were in hiding, Balshan, who was able to fight against the pursuers, was definitely the core of the group. But now that His Majesty no longer needed them to fight, she was the one with nothing. The difference between the two was obvious. For a moment, Charms could empathize with her. When he learned that he was transferred out of the army, he felt as though he was abandoned by the world. Under such circumstances, it was normal for her to have a bad temper. His heart softened as he stared at the lonely figure of the other party. Originally, he had been plotting on how to send her away and invite Dusk alone. But now, he could not bring himself to say it. If Dusk was not around, wouldn't there be no one by her side? After coughing twice, Charms reached into his pocket. I have 2 tickets for the new play. The latter turned around and seemed to be waiting for him to continue. But I have something to do tonight, so I won't be able to go. He hesitated. Why don't you go with Dusk? It's better than wasting it. Balshan revealed a look of surprise. But before she could answer, there was a sudden crackling sound in the sky. Both of them looked up and saw thousands of birds flying over their heads, almost blocking out the sunlight. It was Charm's first time seeing such a flock of migrating birds that resembled dark clouds. He had heard that migratory birds had a fixed wintering period, but this scene clearly did not belong to that category. There were all kinds of birds in the flock, and he always felt that these birds were in a hurry, completely lacking the elegance they usually had when spreading their wings and soaring. What's wrong with them? Charms furrowed his brows. Are they moving collectively? Shoo. Balshan raised a finger. Do you hear anything? Apart from the flapping of wings, is there anything else? No, it's further away. Her expression turned solemn. Charms could only hold his breath and listen. This time he faintly heard a long cry. It was muddy and muffled, mixed in with the flapping of the bird's wings, like an undulating whistle. His eyes widened abruptly. That's an alarm from the north. Chapter 14:25. At this moment, the other workers also noticed that something was amiss and stopped in their tracks. They looked at the black flock of birds and discussed among themselves. Charms realized the urgency of the situation. It was not the alarm used by the city, but the First Army's wartime warning. This meant that the enemy was closing in on the army, and the battle could begin at any moment. Or rather, they were already engaged in battle with the enemy the moment the alarm sounded. Could it be that the demons had returned? If that was the case, it would be too unimaginable. He had followed his father from the Misty Forest to Tower Station number 10, and had a basic understanding of the situation in the north. The main reason why the First Army modified the Tequila ruins was to guard against this. On the vast plains, a tall sentry tower was able to see 10 kilometers away. Not to mention the time required to build a red mist sentry tower. Just the distance between the Holy City ruins and the Neverwinter development was about 300 to 400 kilometers. How did the enemy manage to get so close to the new King's City without any warning? But now was not the time to delve into this. The sentry tower in charge of the second development only had about 100 people stationed there, and they were all rookies. If they were really attacked, would they be able to repel the demons and ensure the safety of the place? Charms was completely uncertain. Balshan suddenly sprinted toward the platform. Hey, where are you going? Dusk is still on the train. I'm going to fetch her. This reply reminded Charms that according to the evacuation rules, everyone should evacuate to the nearest shelter upon hearing the alarm. But the loading dock was located at the outermost edge of the development, and it would take a long time for them to reach the residential area, not to mention returning. Rather than bringing Dusk to the shelter, it was better to take the train and leave. Everyone look here. Charms tore off his badge and raised it high in his hand. I am Charms, a soldier of the First Army. The second development is under attack. Everyone, put down your goods and follow me. This place is too far from the shelter. We need to take the train to avoid danger. He then added softly. Once upon a time. But no one heard what he said. The moment he mentioned the name of the First Army, the workers treated him as their leader. Those who were originally running south also stopped and gathered around him. This scene caused Charms to be slightly surprised, but what followed was an increase in pressure. When he was in the First Army, He had only been a lookout on the Black River and his father's subordinate. He had never had any experience in leading others. Now that he suddenly had a group of people to be responsible for, he could not help but feel uneasy. However, since he had already said it, he could only brace himself and carry on. This way. Charms led the workers to the side of the train and bumped into Hank, who was at a loss. Buddy, what's going on? I just found a corner to relieve myself. Don't worry about that for now. Charms grabbed his shoulder. Are the coal and water ready? How's the air pressure in the boiler? The latter nodded in panic. It's in standby mode and can be activated at any time. Very good. He shouted. Go and pull the steering lever back, we'll drive backwards to Station 1. Don't forget to honk before you release the brakes, understand? Also, keep the gun loaded and in a place where you can reach it at any time. Then how about you? I'll make arrangements for the others first, then meet up with you at the front of the train. 15 minutes later, the train spewed out white smoke as it slowly drove out of Station 2. In this period of time, even more station workers noticed them and hurriedly climbed onto the carriages before the train departed. Amongst them, there was even a group of militia guarding the depot. Although there were only about 10 of them, they were equipped with firearms, which made Charms feel more at ease. Even though he wanted to stay by Duskside, the most important thing at this moment was to transport everyone to a safe location. Thus, after confirming that she was safe, he followed the walkway back to the front of the train. It was at this moment that Charms saw the enemies that were attacking the development. A group of demonic beasts. Oh my God, didn't they say that they would only appear during the months of demons? Hank mumbled as he leaned against the window. Who knows what's happening in this godforsaken place? Charms retrieved his rifle from the locker and climbed up the roof of the train with practiced ease. As the train was moving in reverse, he could clearly see everything that was happening behind him. Many demonic beasts were rampaging as though they had gone mad. Among them were ordinary demonic beasts, and there were also demonic hybrids that were significantly larger. Their speed was much faster than he had expected. Not long after they left the platform, he could already see black figures crossing the tracks and charging into the loading bay. If everyone were to escape on foot, they might not be able to outrun these berserk beasts. He had made the right choice. This thought made Charms heave a sigh of relief. But his doubts remained. Demonic beasts had been defeated by the concrete walls and guns a few years ago, and were unable to take a step into Neverwinter's hinterland. The first army was much stronger than before, so how could they be invaded by demonic beasts now? The next few rounds of gunfire made him even more puzzled. Several demonic hybrids noticed the rumbling train and chased from the north, but they were all shot down by the van, or rifles, leaving behind puddles of black blood. The demonic beasts did not undergo any earth-shattering changes in the past few years. Their attack methods were still the same as wild beasts, with sharp fangs and claws. The threat they posed was far lower than the spear-throwing mad demons. He could not understand how such an enemy could silently attack the Tequila garrison. Bang! Accompanied by a loud bang, the train suddenly stopped, as though it had collided into something. Charms was almost thrown off the train. He turned around angrily and was instantly shocked. A strange monster had appeared beside the train. Half of its body was connected to the carriage, and it was obviously dented from the collision. Blue blood gushed out and drenched half of the carriage. The monster had numerous appendages and a reptilian-like carapace. The pair of scythe-like claws on its head proved its status among the predators. Strangely, he did not notice any monster in front of the carriage, so where did it come from? But Charms did not have the time to bother about this, because he realized that the tracks not far away had been split into two. Hank, brake! He yelled as he got into the carriage, grabbing onto the handrails as fast as he could. Although his companion was confused, he still pulled the brakes at the first instance. A sharp whistle resounded throughout the entire train, and Charms could even smell the burnt smell of the wheels heating up. But it was too late. The train rumbled as it passed through the broken track, and the heavy body of the carriage instantly sank into the gravel as it plunged down the roadbed. The carriages that had lost the restraints of the tracks crashed into each other, and the violent tremors caused the train to overturn. All of you read M. Chapter 1426. For a moment, Charms felt the world spinning around him. His ears were filled with the sound of metal twisting, steam gushing, and Hank's screams. This moment felt like an eternity, and when the carriage finally stopped, his body was already sprawled out by the window. Fortunately, his limbs still obeyed his commands. He flipped over, stuck his head out, and crawled up. The entire process did not encounter any obstructions, which meant that he was basically unharmed. There was no better news than escaping a derailment, even if it was only temporary. "Hey buddy, are you alright?" He endured the smoke and water vapor as he groped his way to Hank's side. "Ugh, I should be fine." Hank let out a groan. "Oh God, what happened?" "The demonic beasts destroyed the train. We need to leave this place as soon as possible." Charms patted his shoulder. "I don't know which city you came from, but remember, the gods will not protect you in Neverwinter. The only ones that can protect you are His Majesty the King and this gun. Now follow me." Climbing out of the window, he saw that the entire train was paralyzed. The carriages were strewn all over the ground, forming a curved line. But due to the deceleration of the train before it derailed, the carriages did not suffer much damage and remained in their original state. Many people were pushing open the doors and windows in an attempt to climb out of the carriages. Right at this moment, Charms heard the crisp sound of a gunshot. His heart skipped a beat as he turned to Hank and shouted, "Listen up. Go and help everyone escape, then lead them to the west." Without the train, it was too risky to continue moving towards station number 1. Furthermore, they could already see the outline of the misty forest. As long as they ran into Lady Leaf's territory, they should be able to escape the pursuit of the demonic beasts. I understand." Seeing the other party nod, Charms started sprinting across the carriage. He had to find Dusk as soon as possible. When he reached the last carriage, Charms discovered that the militia was fighting with a few wolves that had caught up to them. They had already left behind a few corpses, but they were still trying to climb onto the roof of the carriage. He released the safety and opened fire at the wolves from a distance of less than 10 meters. Even though this was the first time he pulled the trigger on an enemy, his past training allowed him to quickly get the hang of it. In a short while he helped the militia kill all of them. However, before he could catch his breath and ask everyone where the witches were, the ground suddenly trembled. The bullet casings that landed on the body of the car slid down one after another, making clanking sounds. When the vibration reached its peak, the ground in front of them suddenly bulged, and a giant worm broke out of the ground, opening its bloody mouth and lying in front of everyone. "What the hell? What is this?" The militiamen screamed and pulled the trigger. The monster's body was immediately shot with blood, but compared to its huge body, the wounds caused by the bullets were not fatal. Following that, the worm's skin swelled up and Charms could clearly see the pulsating green blood vessels below. Following a series of disgusting squirming sounds, a group of demonic beasts covered in mucus was spat out. Charms could not believe his eyes. There was actually such a strange monster amongst the demonic beasts? But at this time he had no time to be amazed. Most of the newly appeared demonic beasts were hybrids. When they dispersed, he would be the unlucky one. "Fire, fire!" he shouted as he fired at the enemy. This sentence awakened the militiamen, and they used the train as cover as they fired at the demonic beasts from the gaps between the gaps. In an instant, many of the hybrids were killed before they could even stand up straight. However, the giant worm did not shrink after spitting out the demonic beasts. Instead, it swelled up until a pair of fangs pierced out from within and tore the worm's mouth apart. Only then did the final hybrid come out, bathed in blood. The moment Charms saw it, his heart turned cold. It was a monster that he had only heard of from his father. The thick fangs and forelimbs indicated that it was the rumored fearful beast of hell. It was also the most difficult enemy to deal with among the hybrids. Not only did it rarely appear at the borders of Neverwinter, ordinary firearms were unable to stop its attacks. After the fearful beast tore open the worm's mouth, it raised its fangs and charged towards the train. Charms subconsciously leaped to the ground, but at the same time, the enemy slammed into the carriage, causing the heavy carriage to slide. 2 militiamen who were unable to evade in time were knocked to the ground by the carriage, and were run over by it. They did not even have the chance to scream before they turned into a pile of flesh and blood. The fearful beast was also unable to move because its fangs were deeply embedded in the metal. The militiamen fired at the target, but it was useless apart from making the beast even more enraged. Suddenly, a slender figure charged into the battlefield. It was clearly a female human, which caused everyone to raise their muzzles. "Danger, get out of the way." Charms immediately recognized the other party and blurted out, "Balshan." He saw Balshan disregard everyone's warning as she leaped forward and rolled into the stomach of the fearful beast. This caused Charm's heart to leap up to his throat. If she was not careful, she would be trampled into meat paste by the monster. Balshan was also aware of this. She followed the struggling monster closely and reached out to grab it. The thick fur began to wither at a visible rate, and the fearful beast of hell let out a soul-stirring roar. As though they had received an order, the other demonic beasts turned around and charged towards the gigantic monster. Their target was obviously the witch below. The situation became extremely dangerous. Once the agile wolf-type or bird-type beast got close to Balshan, she would definitely be unable to defend herself. At this distance, there was a high chance of accidentally injuring her. Everyone was instantly caught in a dilemma. Darn it, there's no other way. Charms gritted his teeth and roared as he charged out from the back of the carriage towards the struggling fearful beast. The situation had taken a strange turn. Previously, both parties were in a state of being chased, but now, it was a matter of who could reach the side of the fearful beast first. A bear-type demonic beast turned its head to bite at him, but he did not dodge and instead thrust his spear forward. Scram! The moment he fired, the spear barrel was almost pressed against the head of the target. With a loud bang, the bear-type's head was blasted into pieces and it fell to the ground. Charms did not even bother to look at it as he continued to charge forward. In order to reduce the chance of accidental injury, there was no other way but to close the distance. At this moment, the mutated goshawk and wild boar had already reached the side of the fearful beast. They risked being trampled by their own kind and bit at Balshan in an attempt to force her out of a dead end. Balshan also knew who was the most threatening target. She held onto the abdomen of the fearful beast tightly and allowed her body to be bitten by the demonic beasts. The area of withering soon covered more than half of the area. Charms had also rushed to Balshan's side and engaged in close combat with the demonic beasts. The advantage of the van, a rifle that didn't require manual loading and had a large magazine, was undeniable. Regardless of whether it was a wild boar with thick skin or a wolf-lion hybrid, as long as it took a bullet to the head, it would be an instant death. As for the bird-type beasts, they could be dealt with using the butt of the rifle. Of course, he was bitten quite a few times as well. In order to protect Balshan, he could only use his body to block the attacks of the enemy. The fearful beast finally pulled out its long fangs, but it did not have much strength left. The power of decay had already spread throughout its entire body, and its seemingly indestructible fur was now as thin as paper, unable to withstand the weight of its organs. It staggered twice before falling to the side. Large amounts of organs and intestines spewed out from the first part of its body that had withered, and at the same time, a pungent smell of decay permeated the air. Charms noticed that the organs had already swelled up and turned white, as though they had been soaked in the sewers for months. The surviving demonic beasts dispersed upon seeing the situation, as though they were completely frightened out of their wits. Enduring the intense pain all over his body, he caught Balshan, who had lost her support and was falling backward, in his arms. Chapter 1427. Why are you here? Charms carried Balshan and limped towards the train. Where's Dusk? She has already met up with the others and retreated towards the misty forest. Balshan forced a smile. As for me, if I didn't come to help, all of you would have died here. So are you blaming me? You think I'm not suited to appear on the battlefield? She mocked weakly. Don't forget that I'm a combat witch. Cough. When you were still playing in the mud, I was already fighting for my survival. You're injured to this extent, but you still don't forget to criticize me. You're not cute at all. But after knowing that Dusk had left, Charms felt much more at ease. Hank probably did what he had instructed him to do. At this moment, A wriggling sound came from behind them. Charms turned around and saw the worm monster with a mouthful of blood swelling up again. What the hell, is there no end to it? He slowly moved to the side of the carriage and placed Balshan on the ground. That's right. Run for your life while there's still time. Balshan took a deep breath. Your cowardly companions have all escaped. Leaving me here can at least, hey. Her expression suddenly changed. What are you trying to do? Charm sat down cross-legged and loaded the bullets in his bag into the empty magazine. Isn't it obvious? It's impossible to outrun the demonic beasts while bringing you along. Then you should just leave me behind and run by yourself. Did you guys do this in the past? But in the First Army, His Majesty taught us to fight for the ordinary people. I can't just leave you, an ordinary person, and let you stall for time while I escape by myself. Balshan was stunned. She never expected that there would be a day when she would be classified as an ordinary person. Charms placed all the magazines by his side and leaned over to hold his rifle. Also, the longer I hold off the enemy, the safer dusk will be. So stop complaining. He didn't blame the militia. They weren't official soldiers, and their main responsibility was to protect the depot and train station from being robbed. Asking them to deal with a monster like the fearful beasts of hell was too much for them. And it was already good that they could last until now. Balshan wanted to say something, but she eventually shut her mouth. They're here. Charms aimed at the newly spewed demonic beasts and pulled the trigger. The crisp sound of gunfire echoed across the plains, but it was much fainter than before. The muzzle of the gun, which was still emitting wisps of smoke, was always aimed at the most threatening target, while the nimble and small demonic beasts were completely left to the people around him to deal with. There was no communication between the two of them, but they had formed a strange tacit understanding. This sense of trust made him feel like he was in the army. He seemed to have resisted for a long time, but also seemed to have resisted for only a short moment. Due to the loss of blood, his vision gradually became blurry, and his hands and feet became slower and slower. On the contrary, Balshan, whose injuries were much worse than his, didn't collapse. She wrapped her clothes around one arm to act as bait, while her other arm was a lethal weapon. Small demonic beasts like wolves and foxes would be severely injured or killed if they were to come into contact with it. Surprisingly, Charms didn't see much despair on her face. She didn't look like someone who was heavily injured. Her high concentration, decisive actions, and blood-stained eyes made Balshan seem completely different from his memories. This also made him realize that this was how a combat witch should look like. She had once lost everything she was good at, but at this moment, she had once again become her true self. A new hybrid emerged from the worm's body, and the two of them knew that this was the final moment. It's a pity about that theater ticket. Balshan moved back to his side with a mocking smile. If you were to die here, I would be at ease. At least I wouldn't have to worry about Dusk being deceived by you. As expected, this fellow isn't cute at all. Charms snorted. That's right, the most regretful one is you. At the last moment, you can only stay with me. No. She interrupted unexpectedly. In fact, I feel that. Woo, the sharp whistle drowned out her words. Following that, balls of flames exploded around the worm, and the rising dust and rubble caused the demonic beasts to temporarily stop moving. Charms was suddenly energized. He forcefully propped himself up and looked towards the direction of the whistle. A black armored train appeared on the horizon behind him, and the cannon at the top of the train flashed continuously. It was the Black River that had galloped across the fertile plains during the northern expedition. He shook Balshan agitatedly. Do you see that? It's the Black River. Our reinforcements have arrived. But the latter didn't give him any response. Hey, Charms turned around abruptly, only to see that the other party had already closed her eyes and slid to the side of the carriage. Wake up, hey, wake up. But no matter how he shook her, Balshan didn't open her eyes. The next time he saw her, it was already 2 days later. This is her room. Do you need me to knock on the door for you? Camilla, the butler of the sleeping spell, asked. No, thank you, I can do it myself. Charms hurriedly bowed to the other party. This was his first time visiting a witch's residence. This place didn't allow outsiders to enter, and only those invited by the residents could enter. He only wanted to give it a try, but he didn't expect to receive approval so quickly. Then please take note of the time. Camilla nodded and left. Charms heaved a sigh of relief. Thinking back to the scene from 2 days ago, he felt rather awkward. Even now, the admonition of the medical staff was still ringing in his ears. She's not dead yet. If you continue shaking her like that, you might really kill her. Seriously, you're clearly someone who has been to the battlefield, but you don't know that it's easy for you to faint after forcefully holding on to your last breath. Don't railway soldiers need to undergo emergency rescue training? You only know how to make a fuss. Could it be that she's someone important to you? Charms hurriedly shook his head to dispel these annoying memories. Actually, after knowing that Balshan was still alive, he didn't have to be in such a hurry to visit her. After all, it was hard to tell who was visiting who based on her appearance. His entire body was wrapped in bandages, and every movement caused him to feel pain all over his body, making him look rather pathetic. But even though he listened, he felt that he wouldn't be at ease if he didn't personally take a look. At this thought, he reached out and knocked on the door. Coming. The door opened, and Xiaya entered his sight. It's really you. She revealed a happy smile. When I received Lady Camilla's notice, I guessed that it was you even before she said your name. Thank you for saving Balshan. Hey, you must be mistaken. I was the one who saved her. A familiar voice sounded from within the room. Charms walked into the room and immediately saw Balshan leaning against the headboard. Sunlight shone in through the window, illuminating half of her cheeks and short brown hair. What surprised him was that even though her injuries were much more severe, she seemed to be in better spirits than him. Of course, she was also tightly wrapped in bandages, including her head. There's nothing strange about it. Balshan shrugged as though she saw through his doubts. A witch's body is stronger than an ordinary person's in every aspect, so it's natural for her to recover much faster. So, she paused for a moment. Don't think that you'll have the chance to be alone with Dusk. Charms silently rolled his eyes. He could tell that this fellow didn't need anyone's concern. Since that's the case, I'll take my leave. Hey, you're leaving just like that? Dusk asked in surprise. Of course, standing isn't good for recuperating, especially for someone like me who is inferior to her in every aspect. Charms looked at Balshan provocatively. I have to recover quickly and meet you. Meet you to watch a play before she does. Meet me. Dusk's eyes curved into a smile. Sure. Wait a minute, she agreed so quickly? Don't even think about it. Balshan said coldly. I'll definitely recover faster than you. Then let's give it a try. Let's give it a try. The two of them stared at each other and began their usual quarrel. Dusk tilted her head and smiled as she stood by the side, looking as though she was happy that the two of them had reunited after a calamity. When he walked out of the room, Charms suddenly recalled the words that were covered by the steam whistle. He turned around and asked, Right, what did you say before you fainted? Nothing. Balshan replied indifferently. When the train arrived, I was already in a daze. You probably remembered wrongly. All right. Charms rubbed his head and closed the door. What was he asking? Dusk asked curiously. Just some nonsense. Balshan smiled and tilted her head to face the sunlight. This isn't bad. Chapter 1428. Middle section of the impassable mountain range, Hermes Mountain Range. The gigantic shadow cast by the deity of gods had already touched the edge of the highlands. Floating life beasts flowed through the mountains and connected the east and west wings, causing the mountain range to become a magnificent red line. With this supply line, the army at the ridge of the continent could enter the Four Kingdoms without any restrictions. Everything was just as Mask had predicted. Although the humans' harassment never stopped, they were helpless against the deity of God's advance. The following battle would turn into a war of attrition without any skill. The race had the advantage in numbers. Furthermore, their technology allowed them to have the greatest number. Even the inferior demon bodies that were useless in the past could become powerful war machines. The disparity between the two was even greater. The opponent did possess extraordinary skills, but it did not shorten the intrinsic difference between the races. From birth to maturity, The former required at least a decade, while the inferior demon bodies only required a short 2 years. They did not need to go through the trouble of choosing a mate and mating. With the constant increase in casualties, the humans would collapse sooner or later. That's right, the development did not deviate from his expectations, except for one thing. I want to know what's going on. He stood in the observation room at the bottom of the deity of gods and roared at his subordinates. His subordinates looked at each other and lowered their heads, none of them daring to speak. He rarely asked questions that he already knew the answer to, because it was just venting his emotions and a waste of time. Only lowly beings like Blood Conqueror and Loathing would be passionate about it. It was obvious what had happened. A large number of demonic beasts had appeared on the Hermes Highlands and were engaged in battle with the symbiotic demons that he had released. The symbiotic demons were supposed to be rushing towards the Four Kingdoms and slowly whittling down the human strength. But now, a portion of them were being held back by the demonic beasts. They converged into numerous black tides on the plains and surged into the abandoned city through the large gap. This pass might have been a fortress used by the humans to defend against the demonic beasts, but it had now been replaced by the race. It would have been fine if that was all. Nasapel saw the Skysea Realm's nest amidst the horde of demonic beasts. This was the true reason for his loss of composure. Unlike humans, the race had long understood that the so-called demonic beasts were a branch of the Skysea Realm, similar to the inferior demons of the race. Every time the months of demons came and the magic power was abundant, the nest would release a large number of spores, which would be blown to the earth by the sea breeze and infect the ordinary beasts, transforming them into various strange species, and then let them evolve and fight on their own. The demonic beasts had low combat strength and posed little threat to the race. The Skysea Realm's beasts. The Skysea Realm. From another point of view, this was a manifestation of the Skysea Realm's lack of control over the continent. Other than using such methods to create minor problems for their race, it was difficult for them to encroach on the continent's hinterlands. But the nest was realm range. It was the backbone of the Skysea Realm, and its race would not easily let go of such a target. Furthermore, of the Skysea clan had realm, they had demons. And sea. Above, realm. The tribe had the land, king lands, dragon, demon. Over the past 800 years, the race had slowly annexed more than half of the land of Dawn. They had also established a long line of defense near the sea to prevent the Skysea Realm from ambushing them from the rear. It was understandable for the demonic beasts to gather in the continent's interior, but the appearance of the nest made the nature of the situation completely different. Either an idiot had neglected his duties and missed out on the Skysea Realm's movements, or something serious had happened in the rear. His subordinates had most likely thought of this, which was why they did not dare to respond. Thinking back to the sudden loss of contact with the king, Nasapel felt extremely vexed and uneasy. Lord Mask, a higher ascendant, suddenly walked into the observation room. There's a message from the birth tower. The king is summoning you. What? Nasapel turned his head abruptly. Are you sure it's the king? The other party was taken aback. From the fluctuations in the realm of mind, it's indeed the presiding Holy See. My lord, is there a problem? No, I'll head over now. Nasapel restrained his emotions and said coldly. He and Silent Disaster agreed that it was best not to reveal the fact that they had lost contact with the Blackstone region. It was normal for his subordinates to have such a reaction. In the end, it was the nest that messed up his pace. Reaching the top of the tower, Mask concentrated and responded to the intense fluctuations. It was indeed from the presiding Holy See. However, there were some minute differences from before. Unfortunately, with his standard, he was unable to identify the source of the abnormality. Thank you for your summons, my esteemed king. What happened previously? The moment Nasapel opened his mouth, he habitually complained. In the days without your guidance, I have been feeling uneasy. Furthermore, Skylord's whereabouts are unknown. Thankfully, the symbiote's performance was extremely outstanding, allowing the Western Front to... Enough. The king interrupted him. I know you have a lot to say, but that's not important. The Blackstone region has been lost. Nasapel immediately forgot the words of praise to the back of his mind. He paused for a moment before repeating in disbelief. Blackstone region lost? Although it has not been completely invaded by the Skysea realm, it is only a matter of time. Our enemies have become completely different from the past. This has caused the already weak defensive line to completely collapse. Heart of Hatred has died on the battlefield. The king's tone was unperturbed, as though he was discussing a matter that had nothing to do with the fate of his race. I have already given the order to abandon the Blackstone region and retreat to the Land of Dawn. King, please think twice. Nasapel turned anxious. It was a great migration of hundreds of millions. Even excluding the demonic bodies, there were at least tens of millions. Under the situation of lacking red mist supplies, how many people could reach the Land of Dawn alive? Perhaps not even 10% of the total. Furthermore, the Land of Dawn was now being attacked by the Skysea realm. They had to venture deep into the continent to gain a foothold. But how could there be so many strongholds in the fertile plains to supply their race? If they had the ability, they would not have attempted to occupy Tequila. Sacrifices are unavoidable, but this is the best solution at the moment. The king spoke bluntly. Red mist is not a problem. Once the decision is made to retreat, the past birth towers can be transferred to obtain new life. This technology has already been proven on the ridge of the continent. As for Starfall City, Arietta, Tequila, Hermes, and even the God Stone mines in the human territories, they can all be used as new incubation points. But moving so many birth towers at the same time, even with the strength of the entire race, Nasapel was suddenly stunned. Don't tell me you. That's right, I have already fused with the magic power core, allowing King's City to become the new deity of gods. Mask could not help but shiver. Fusing with inanimate objects meant that the king would forever be fixed to the birth tower, becoming something similar to the mother of the race. The ice-cold logic was merciless to him, causing him to feel fear from the bottom of his heart. It was probably because of the king's transformation that they had lost contact with him previously. But it was as the king had said. This way, all the logistical problems could be easily resolved. With the power of the deity of gods, it was completely possible to accommodate multiple birth towers and replace the strongholds to spread the red mist, minimizing the losses of the migration. Then the final problem was the humans. The moment this thought emerged, it was confirmed by the king. My race no longer has the time to waste with the humans. We have to obtain the legacy shard as soon as possible. Only then will we have a chance to contend against the current Skysea realm. And there was only one way to destroy the humans in an extremely short period of time, regardless of the cost. I order you, from the moment the first batch of migrants reach the fertile plains, the Western Front operation will shift to Plan B. The king ordered. Nasapel could not help but feel excited. In fact, Plan B was his brainchild, but he never expected it to be realized. It would definitely be an earth-shattering destruction. Chapter 1429. A grand scene unfolded in the city of Glow in the Kingdom of Dawn. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, the church procession held up rows of flags and slowly passed through the city gate. Leading the way for them was the royal knights. This was a solemn treatment that had not been seen for a long time. Everyone's eyes were on the woman in the middle of the procession, who was dressed in luxurious clothes and wore a crown on her head. She was the rumored new pope, the key figure who defeated the rebels and led Hermes back on the right track. Although the church's invasion of the kingdom of Wolfheart and the kingdom of Everwinter had tarnished its image, it was undeniable that it still had a certain influence. Recently, the procession often passed through the front line of the battlefield, rescuing the refugees and encouraging the people to fight against the demons, which won them a lot of gratitude and gratitude. The news also spread back to the city of Glow through various channels, which made the people curious about the new pope. After all, in the past, the pope was a high and mighty figure. Even the king had to get permission to meet him. It was rare to see a pope who was willing to take risks and even cared about every civilian. Every time the woman nodded and smiled at the crowd, there would always be a burst of excitement. In addition to her identity, her extremely outstanding appearance was also one of the reasons for the sensation. Finally, The procession stopped in front of the castle in the inner city. The Pope dismounted and walked up the stairs step by step. Standing at the door was Roland Wimbledon, the King of Grey Castle, who welcomed her. The two stretched out their hands and shook hands. Although it was the first time for most people to see this kind of strange etiquette, they could see the equality in it. This also proved the rumor that the new pope had the support of Grey Castle, and the relationship between the two had been reshaped. In the warm applause of the crowd, the two walked into the castle side by side. "Sorry, Your Majesty, I was impolite." After the door was closed, the woman bent down and was about to kneel on one knee when Roland pulled her up. "No, I think this is good. Besides, you're no longer the pure witch of the past. The witch union doesn't need such complicated etiquette. Have you been in the holy city for too long and forgotten this point?" The woman was Isabella, who had been transferred from Hermes to take over the holy city as the Pope's representative. She was responsible for settling the nuns and orphans, and preventing the pill of madness from leaking. Of course not. After Isabella finished speaking, she suddenly froze. She looked up in surprise and said, "Your Majesty, you just said, you didn't hear wrongly. Vendi suggested to accept you as a member of the alliance, and I agreed to her suggestion." Roland nodded. "Although the punishment is 5 years, you did a good job in Hermes. Consider it a reward." It took Isabella a while to react. "But Your Majesty, after joining the Witch Union, you'll be given a fixed amount of chaos drinks every month." The latter's but was instantly stuck in his throat. "I know what you want to say, really." Roland sighed. "You pure ones always like to persist in strange places, or torture yourself. Besides, atonement doesn't require shackles and chains. If I have to keep preparing these things for you, it will be a headache for me. So at times like this, just say thank you to Vendi like everyone else." "Yes." Isabella bit her lip and slowly lowered her head. "I understand. I know you've been living in responsibility and orders in the past, but it doesn't matter. One day, you'll get used to this new way of life." Roland changed the topic. "This meeting is a rare opportunity for publicity, so it should be more grand. But I don't want to waste any more time on ceremonies and banquets. You should know that Neverwinter has been attacked by demonic beasts." "Yes." Speaking of business, Isabella's expression suddenly became serious. "Did you ask me to come here to learn more about demonic beasts?" "Yes. After all, in the past 100 years, Hermes has been the main force in fighting against demonic beasts. I think the church must have accumulated a lot of relevant information." Isabella replied without hesitation. "I'll tell you everything I know." When he learned that Neverwinter was suddenly attacked by demonic beasts 4 days ago, Roland did not pay much attention to it at first. He had experienced many months of demons in the western region, and people had been able to use wooden guns and firearms to fight against demonic beasts several years ago, let alone the current army. Although it was unusual for a large number of demonic beasts to appear outside the months of demons, the first army was fighting with demons in many areas, so he had no time to think about the reasons behind it. Unexpectedly, the development of the situation was beyond his expectation. That night, he received several telegrams from the tower at North Slope Mountain, and the situation took a turn for the worse. A large number of demonic beasts crossed the Tequila line and launched an attack on the development area. The garrison also made corresponding resistance, but failed to stop the enemy's attack. If not for the timely armored train support, the loss would be even more shocking. Moreover, the report mentioned that several witnesses claimed to have seen ghost-like monsters, which moved quickly, silently, and almost invisible to the naked eye. They would only appear after being stained with blood. This made Roland realize that he might have seriously underestimated the ability of demonic beasts. When Isabella finished her report, Roland found that his guess was confirmed. Compared to the holy city of Hermes, the months of demons in the western region of Grey Castle was just a tributary of the sea. There were far more types of demonic beasts than demons, and some hybrids were even difficult to find their original forms among the wild beasts. For example, wild beasts with extremely long bodies could pass through the ground and climb up the city walls, and cold howling birds with goat horns and bird bodies were all monsters that had never been seen in the western region. At the same time, he had a basic idea of the reason for this attack. A large number of demonic beasts suddenly appeared behind the development area, which was most likely due to wild beasts. But this still could not explain why the situation in Neverwinter became so serious. Even if the rear did not have a huge city wall like the Holy City, and the first army was made up of inexperienced rookies, the gap in weapons was enough to make up for all this. Perhaps the people would fall into chaos at first, but after the emergency plan was activated, the army should be able to quickly stabilize the situation. In addition, he noticed that Isabella did not mention the ghost-like monsters, which made him wonder, was it a new enemy or a false report made by the people in the chaos? At this time, a servant walked into the room with a paper package in his arms. "Your Majesty, a new letter has been sent from Neverwinter." "Not a telegram?" Roland was a little surprised. "Yes, it was sent by the Air Knight. Let's take it apart." Inside the paper bag was a stack of pictures. Roland spread them out on the table, only to find that they were all the real portraits of the attackers. Obviously, these pictures were drawn by Soroya. Compared with written reports, the latter was undoubtedly more accurate and vivid in terms of intelligence. It seemed that even if they had no fighting ability, they were still doing their best to protect their home. Soon, a picture of a monster's corpse caught Roland's attention. It seemed to have been hit by a train, and most of its body was stuck to the iron plate. Its appearance could not be associated with any of the demonic beasts described by Isabella. "This kind of hybrid, have you seen it in Hermes?" He took out the drawing and put it in front of Isabella. She looked at it carefully and then shook her head. But Nightingale, who had been standing behind Roland, suddenly let out a soft cry of "Ha!" Bookseller's website. Chapter 1430. Why? Roland tilted his head. "Is there a problem? It looks similar to some of the things I've killed before." Nightingale spread out her hands. "But those monsters were much smaller and didn't have such an exaggerated appearance." "Wait, are you referring to the exploration at the Great Snow Mountain?" Nightingale nodded. "Even earlier, when we were searching for the Ice Witch. From the point of invisibility, it makes sense that it was treated as a ghost. What's the difference between these two monsters? Can you explain in more detail?" Roland pressed. Let me think. After all, it was a few years ago." Nightingale picked up the picture. "The monster I encountered was at most half the height of this monster in the picture. Its front claws were also in the shape of a sickle, but shrunk a few times. Its abdomen only had accessory feet for climbing, but not so many claws. As for the head, yes, the clawed beast back then didn't have such an obvious mouth and sharp teeth. The one in the picture was more like a predator. If not for the front claws and invisibility, I really wouldn't have linked the two together. At that time, I even thought that they were some kind of hybrid demonic beast." Roland's expression turned solemn. "But later, I discovered that those monsters belonged to the Sky-Sea realm. If the threat that the demonic beasts posed was limited, the Sky-Sea realm was a completely different matter. As participants in the Battle of Divine Will, they could oppress the demons in places where humans couldn't see. Their strength was definitely not to be underestimated. If the forces of the Sky-Sea realm appeared in the western region, it was definitely not good news. But the entire northern part of the Fertile Plains was occupied by the demons after the first Battle of Divine Will. So how did the Sky-Sea realm infiltrate the hinterland of the continent? Could it be a horrifying and exaggerated idea vaguely drilled into his mind? Yes, speaking of demonic beasts, the First Army was also attacked by demonic beasts when we entered the Snow Mountain ruins. Nightingale raised her eyebrows. It's too much of a coincidence. Could it be that the demonic beasts and the Sky-Sea realm are in cahoots? Roland and Isabella immediately looked at Nightingale. The latter curled his lips. I was just saying. You don't have to take it to heart. In short, I'm afraid this matter is more troublesome than I expected. Roland tapped the table lightly. No matter what, Neverwinter was the core of human industry, and no accidents could be allowed. If the attack had anything to do with the Sky-Sea realm, it would not be excessive to use the most prudent countermeasures. Isabella, The information you provided is very useful. Go and rest for a while. I will let the person in charge of the general staff contact you later. Isabella did not leave. Your Majesty, I still have something to report to you. What is it? Say it. While I was in Hermes, I didn't stop experimenting with the God Stone. She took out a stack of paper from her coat and placed it on the table. Do you still remember the conclusion that Agatha came up with? It was not because the magic was too dense that it hindered the casting of the ability, but because of other factors. On this basis, I repeatedly studied it and found that this factor is very likely related to frequency. Frequency? Roland was surprised. This statement was indeed based on the natural science theoretical foundation that you wrote. It may not be very accurate, but I really can't think of a better description. Isabella then briefly described her discovery. In fact, not long after I came up with this conclusion, my magic power condensed. Nightingale blinked in surprise. After observing for a while, she said, "It's true. I didn't notice this before." Roland laughed. Doesn't that mean that the Alliance has another evolved witch? Congratulations, you've broken through your limits. Isabella shook her head. It's all because you gave me this opportunity. But it's your choice to persist in the research, he rejected. Do you have any new feelings after the evolution of your ability? Isabella stretched out her hand. There was a ring on her slender middle finger, and the prismatic gem in the center of the ring gradually glowed. That was most likely a stone of lighting. Others might be surprised, but not Roland. But he was a little confused. This stone seemed to be a little different. This stone is not made by the demons. Nightingale exclaimed in a low voice. Roland immediately realized that for the demons, magic stones were the source of their power to upgrade and fight. Beauty was never a factor to consider, so most of them were round. And this stone had obvious cut marks, like jewelry. It was polished into a prismatic polyhedron, which was basically only done by humans. But humans did not have the ability to produce magic stones. All the magic stones so far were seized from wars and excavated ruins. And cutting and polishing would destroy the magic stone's structure. In other words, it must be processed first and then transformed. This is my first experiment after the evolution. Isabella seemed a little emotional. It originally came from a god's locket of retribution in the church's dungeon, but now it can no longer confine any witches. Roland opened his mouth in surprise. You turned a god stone into a stone of lighting? Yes, Your Majesty. Isabella nodded. In the past, I could only completely smooth out the fluctuations of the god stone, but now I can weaken it to a specific frequency, and the result is the so-called magic stone. But so far, only a part of the magic stone can be reproduced by this method, which I'm afraid has something to do with my incomplete understanding. It took Roland more than half an hour to roughly understand what Isabella meant by combining the experimental manuscripts and asking questions. To put it simply, Isabella's understanding of the god stone was based on her own ability. In her eyes, the fluctuations of the god stone were so strong that it was difficult to feel that it was constantly changing. At first glance, it looked like a dead dark domain. Under this kind of fluctuation, other fluctuations could not be expressed, which was why the god stone could isolate abilities. But whether it was fluctuation or frequency, they were all descriptions after being translated by her ability. Isabella had vaguely sensed the difference between the two, but limited by her knowledge, she could not express it accurately. After all, the fluctuation was something obvious, but magic power was not. She could only choose the most similar words to describe it from the concepts she already knew. This reminded Roland that Lon seemed to have said the same thing. Once the communication system between the two parties was too different, it was difficult to even express it, let alone understand it. But Isabella's evolution proved one thing. The magic stone was not exclusive to the demons. If magic power one day became a new subject, then her experiments were likely to be the starting point of magic mechanics. No one can help you on this path, but that's exactly why it's worth a try, Roland encouraged. I'll do my best, Isabella said with a hand on her chest. Finally, during the experiment, I also found an incredible phenomenon. Agatha's guess is probably right. I'm afraid the Godstone is not a dead object. Chapter 1431. Not a dead thing. What do you mean? Nightingale frowned. Could it be that the Godstone in the mine can talk? I haven't found anything like that yet, but when I was testing at the bottom of the Hermes vein, I accidentally found a few rats eroded by the Godstone. Isabella closed her eyes as if she was recalling the scene at that time. They may be lost people from the upper levels of the Privy Council after the collapse of the new holy city. No one knows how the rats were captured by the Godstone, but part of their body has been immersed in the Godstone, as if the two have merged into one. When the insect is wrapped in rosin, it can be seen as a whole, but the amber is still not a living thing, Roland said bluntly. I know. Isabella's face showed a trace of fear. If that's the case, I wouldn't make such an assertion. The problem is, the rat is still alive. When I get close, it will scream at me, as if begging me to release it. Roland could not help but shiver. He suddenly understood why the other party was afraid. Fear of the unknown. And she was standing in front of a field that she had never seen before. Could it be that the rats have just been attached to it? Nightingale asked, pretending to be relaxed. I observed them for 3 months and 9 days, and they never stopped screaming. Isabella sighed softly. On the 10th day, I used a dagger to separate one of them. I found that its stomach was already empty, and it had even shrunk because of the long period of abandonment, but some of its blood vessels had grown into the Godstone. This meant that for a whole 3 months, it was the Godstone that provided the energy for the rats to survive. It seems that I have thought too simply. Roland could not help but smile bitterly. He previously thought that only living things can gather magic, was a fallacy caused by his lack of understanding of magic, but the evidence found by Isabella undoubtedly pushed the fallacy one step further. I've seen it in the church's all living things record. Some rare plants can connect with animals, forming a strange symbiotic relationship. She continued. Although we can't conclude that the Godstone is a plant, at least it's not a dead thing. Following this train of thought, some of the unique phenomena of the devils became easier to understand. For example, the steels that kept growing, as well as the giant monsters at the bottom of the steels. Perhaps they made use of this to build the species system they have today. In that case, demons do like to use stones. Nightingale said thoughtfully. It's a pity that my research is still shallow. Most of it is just superficial speculation. I can't give you any substantial help. Isabella lowered her head apologetically. Not only has the reason for the fusion not been identified, but even the transformation of magic stones can only produce low-level magic stones such as the glowing stone and the screaming stone. You underestimate your discovery too much. Roland interrupted. Regardless of whether the conjecture that the frequency of the wave determines the effect is correct or not, the fact that witches can produce magic stones with their ability alone is enough to make your name go down in history. He would be lying to himself if he said he had no regrets. If the other party could produce high-level magic stones, it meant that powerful sigils such as Infinity and Divine Will could be used limitlessly, and combat witches could also become a decisive force on the battlefield. However, he also knew that the exploration of magic power was bound to be a long and tortuous process. Isabella had just opened the door and glimpsed a corner of it. As long as she could continue her research, the results would undoubtedly be worth looking forward to, considering the average lifespan of witches. After Isabella left, Roland immediately spread out a pen and paper, and drafted a telegram to be sent to City Hall. The telegram was very simple, with only one sentence. Neverwinter cannot be lost. From today onwards, the emergency plan will be activated, and the state of general mobilization will be entered. The plan will provide as many soldiers as possible for the front line, as long as the food supply is affordable. In addition to the expansion of the army, industrial production will also be inclined to the manufacture of armaments, and living materials will be limited. Although as early as the beginning of the Battle of Divine Will, he had ordered Chief Barov to formulate the corresponding general mobilization plan, it was not easy to implement it. First of all, in terms of administrative integrity, at present, only Neverwinter could adapt and adjust the policies, personnel, and production. If it were to be implemented in other cities, it would easily become a forced conscription, and the order that had been restored with great difficulty would once again be paralyzed. Secondly, even if the First Army massively expanded, logistics would not appear out of thin air. In this era, it was almost impossible to carry out a cross-border battle of 100,000 people by relying on ships and livestock to transport supplies. However, if the main battlefield was the western region, the administrative and logistical restrictions would no longer exist. Neverwinter was the front line of this defensive battle, and also the last fortress of humanity. No matter what price they had to pay, they could not take a step back, even if the enemy was the Sky-Sea realm, because there was no retreat for humanity. Who's there? The Silent Lord, who was soaking in the red mist pond, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the darkness opposite him. Just a moment ago he had heard a faint sound. If it was under normal circumstances, he would not have asked. All he had to do was pick up his weapon and slash to know the outcome. If a junior demon or primal demon dared to enter his recuperation area without permission, they deserved to be cleaved in half. The reason why Silent Lord did not immediately take action was because his sword was not by his side. He would only remove his armor and weapon when he was recuperating. In the darkness, a figure slowly walked out. "Don't attack. It's me." Hacksword was slightly taken aback. From the voice, it was the long-lost Sky Lord Hacksword. Silent Lord suddenly stood up from the pool and draped a white cloth over his body. "Where did you go? Could it be, as Mask said, that you fled at the last minute?" "Humph, I wouldn't be surprised by anything that deformed freak says. This is also the reason why I came to find you alone." Hacksword slowly walked to the side of the pool. Only then did Silent Lord notice that there was a large hole in his chest armor. The internal wound was so deep that bones could be seen. Although the bleeding had stopped, the injury was far from healing. "You're injured?" With Sky Lord's abilities, fleeing at the last minute would not have landed him in such a state. "I never thought there would be a day where I would need your concern." Hacksword sneered and struggled to climb into the red mist pool. "As for where I went, don't worry. You'll find out very soon. But before that, I have to show you something." "What is it?" "Concentrate, then remain relaxed. Close your eyes." Hearing such a strange request, Silent Lord was about to reject it, but when he saw the other party's unquestionable expression, he suddenly realized something. This was clearly a preparation to enter the realm of mind. He hesitated for a moment before finally closing his eyes. In that instant, an indescribable scene surged into Silent Lord's mind. In the strange scene of the Continent of Light, the nameless secret letter, the white-clothed kin, the giant tower with the pillar of light, the bottomless pit, and other scenes flashed by. Finally, what appeared before him was a swarm of nests surrounded by claws. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1432. This was memory reading. The only difference was that they had exposed their memories to the king in the presiding Holy See, but now Hacksword was the one who took the initiative to instill memories into her consciousness. Silent Disaster took a long time before severing the connection. Memories were difficult to forge and were far more accurate than narration, but it also had a flaw that could not be ignored. It was easy to see fragments outside of the matter. The open memories were like an unguarded city. Silent Disaster never expected Sky Lord to choose such a method to convey information to her. There's no need to say anything else." Hacksword's voice was very deep. Clearly, this action had exhausted her. "If I didn't do this, would you believe what I experienced?" The answer was undoubtedly no. A small island not far from the Blackstone region was actually the real location of the origin of magic. Even after reading the memories, she still felt that it was unreal, much less verbally. "You can create your own consciousness domain?" Silent Disaster changed the topic. Hacksword gave her a puzzled look. "I thought you would first pay attention to Valkyrie's whereabouts. But you guessed right. If not for that, I wouldn't have been able to transmit my memories to you. The moment I saw the Tree of Light, I suddenly had a deeper understanding of the realm of mind. If not for the Sky-Sea realm's interruption, I might have been able to improve further. Of course, compared to the king's holy see, my domain is much smaller. I see. Silent Disaster returned to the side of the pool with her back facing Sky Lord. I really want to know the whereabouts of the Nightmare Lord. When I saw that slip of paper, I wanted to immediately go to the human kingdom to look for her. But reason tells me that I have to reject your request. Reject what? Hacksword flipped over. From this angle, he could see the other party's smooth back and a lock of long blue hair that fell into the pool. I rarely speak, but that doesn't mean I don't think, Silent Disaster said slowly. You came to find me first instead of reporting this situation to the king. Your intentions are self-evident. You want to stop the battle of divine will, or wait for the truth to be revealed before making a decision. This is undoubtedly a violation of the king's decree. It's no different from betrayal. Once the king finds out, he definitely won't let you off easily. You're alone, so you need help. I am the helper you chose to seek help from. No, I am absolutely loyal to the king. Hacksword retorted in a low voice. Since we know that the battle of divine will is a scam, why do we still participate in it and wait for our doom? Do you think the king will be stubborn? As long as I find a way to contact Valkyries, the king will definitely understand what the right choice is, so... As it spoke, its voice grew softer and softer. Damn, you saw it all. Yeah, Silent Disaster said frankly. I didn't do it on purpose, but memory can't be filtered and omitted like language. From the moment you left the bottomless land, you knew that the king would never agree to your actions. The battle of divine will was a scam, and the realm of mind hid an even deeper secret. This did not conflict with the destruction of the human race and the Skysea realm. Even if the information on the note was true, as long as they did not combine the legacy shards, the upgrade would not begin. They had plenty of time to decipher this secret. Regardless, everything related to the divine will should be in their own hands. Leaving a competitor alive was an extremely dangerous thing. Indeed, the destruction of the human race could cause the shapeshifters to completely disappear from the realm of mind. But compared to the entire race, a senior lord was negligible, even if the other party was Valkyries. The king would not allow emotions to affect his judgment. The only rule he followed was ice-cold logic. Once the war stopped, the speed of development of the human race might cause the advantage of the race to disappear. This was something that Osrook had repeatedly emphasized. The king would never take this risk. Hacksword was definitely aware of this. If this were any other time, I would definitely beat you to the point where you can't escape and hand you over to the king for judgment. Silent Disaster sighed. But seeing that all of this is because you want to save Valkyries, I can pretend that I don't know. Since you understand, then shouldn't you take action? Or are you saying? Hacksword glanced sideways at the Nightmare Lord's body on the other side of the red mist pond. Your respect for Valkyries is all an act. Compared to her, you wish to see an empty... Bang. Silent Disaster punched the red mist pond, causing a few cracks to appear on the stone foundation, but it also made Sky Lord shut his mouth in time. Firstly, all of your deductions are based on a note of unknown origins. It is undoubtedly Valkyrie's handiwork, but that's all there is to it. But it foretold the existence of the bottomless land. It also said that the deity of gods isn't safe, but the humans are unable to stop us. Silent Disaster said coldly. You want me to publicly go against the king's will just for a note? In fact, I'm willing to pretend that I've never heard of it and take the corresponding risk. If it were you, I'm afraid you wouldn't even be able to do that. That wasn't my intention. We could have slowed down our attacks and investigated in secret, as long as we could hide it from Mask. This is also the second point I want to make. You came back too late. Silent Disaster interrupted him. The king has already sent a new order. Mask will be in charge of the Western Front. Execute Plan B. You are no longer the person in charge of the Western Front. Or rather, there will no longer be a Western Front. How can that be? Hacksword stood up from the red mist pond and clutched his chest with a pained expression. You should have felt it, right? The ripples in the realm of mind. Silent Disaster said expressionlessly. In fact, it's much more serious than that. Not only did the heart of hatred die in battle, The Blackstone region's defensive line has also collapsed. In an extremely dangerous situation, the king and the core fused, causing King City to become the new deity of gods. Now the entire race is moving to the only remaining land, and your plans have no chance of being realized. If you want to buy time, you have to go against his orders, which is no different from going against the king. So I am unable to promise you. Hacksword realized that the situation was completely out of his control. Although it was rare for a senior lord to fall, it was not strange for any accidents to happen on the battlefield. But he never expected that the situation would suddenly worsen to such an extent. Could it be that the mutation of the blades was not a special phenomenon? He naturally knew what Plan B was. Back when Mask was researching the deity of gods, he had mentioned a crazy method of combat. Without considering the cost, the core and the god's stone mine could be squeezed to the limit, allowing the floating island to rise to an astonishing height. At such a time, the immense weight was enough to turn it into a lethal weapon. When the deity of gods fell from the sky, only God's punishment could compare to it. Although Hacksword was not sure how terrifying it was, according to Mask, the ground would crack and the dust that would rise would cover the sky and even spread thousands of miles away. Lava would also erupt from the cracks, turning the entire land into an abyss of fire. To deplete a precious deity of gods with a single attack, Hacksword originally thought that the plan would never come to fruition, but he never expected the king to agree to it. As such, his plan had indeed become empty talk. How could he stand out alone and defy the king? The future of his race might be uncertain, but his fate was already set in stone. Other than being hunted down by the other senior lords, there was no other possibility. Maybe you're right. Hacksword slowly sat back down in the pool. I was indeed too inconsiderate, and nearly committed a grave mistake. Since I have already switched to Plan B, I should return to Sky City and make arrangements for the follow-up. Bang! Another crack appeared on the pool wall. Skylord froze in surprise. Do you intend to give up on Valkyries? The latter finally turned around. Its eyes were as cold as ice as it looked down at him, as if it would make him bleed on the spot if he said the word yes. Hacksword was momentarily at a loss for words. He couldn't save her, but he couldn't not save her either. Was he being reasonable? He suddenly understood Mask's feelings a little. I rejected your request, but that doesn't mean I will give up on saving her. Then the method is? I don't know. Precisely because I don't know, you have to think about it. Silent Disaster's tone was unquestionable. But no matter what, don't think you can leave now. Following that, he retracted the chill in his voice and closed his eyes. Especially after you gave me hope. Chapter 1433. Be careful. They're charging at us again. Following Fishball's loud warning, the temporary defensive line formed by less than 100 people erupted with concentrated gunfire. Under the barrage of firepower, the agile small monstrous beasts had no choice but to slow down and slowly crawl through the flying debris and dust. And the two 75mm field cannons had been waiting for this moment. When fired horizontally within a kilometer, its accuracy was astonishing and its power was far stronger than the anti-demon grenade. It could be said to be the nemesis of these stubborn rock monsters. Soon, the small monstrous beast at the very front was hit by the cannonball. Half of its body exploded, and one of its legs even fell 100 meters away. After losing a few monstrous beasts, the remaining demons retreated and once again hid in the red mist. But everyone knew that this was only a temporary lull. They would return at any time, from all directions. This scene did not only occur in the northern part of the Kingdom of Dawn. From Mount Kento in the Kingdom of Wolfheart to Coldwind Ridge in Grey Castle, there were many similar battles taking place at every moment. The only difference was the scale. Thus, the First Army adopted a corresponding strategy. Large numbers of troops were used to deal with large numbers of enemies, and small numbers of invaders were left to a small number of people. The team led by Fishball was precisely such a blocking team that filled in the gaps. They relied on the city to intercept the demons that attempted to cross the cordon, ensuring that the humans had a firm foothold in the red mist. Even though Fishball was only a lowly officer, He knew that his mission was closely related to the overall strategy. According to the calculations of the higher-ups, in a few months, the red mist from Hermes would be enough to cover the entire city of Glow. Thus, fighting in the red mist was the trend in the future. They had to adapt to the battlefield without the support of the witches and maintain the normal operations of the Kingdom of Dawn. It had to be said that this kind of battle was very passive. After all, no one knew where the demons would come from, or how they would enter the cordon. And it was impossible to set up a fixed defensive line that extended along the northern border of the Four Kingdoms. Be it manpower or logistics, they were far from enough. Thus, the higher-ups' plan was rather helpless. Fortunately, the weapons in the hands of the soldiers were getting better and better. Even though there were only a few dozen of them, they were still able to produce a decent amount of firepower in a short period of time. For example, his team had 3 or 4 general-purpose machine guns, 10 horses and 2 field cannons. As long as they didn't run into a senior devil, they would be able to escape unscathed. In the end, this stalemate was caused by the First Army's helplessness against the floating island. It was precisely because it was impossible to destroy the mobile stronghold, even if they attacked the Hermes Plateau, that everyone could only focus on defense. At present, the only one who could actively threaten the demons was the Empty Night team led by Princess Royal Highness. If I had known earlier, I would have signed up for the Air Knight Academy, someone said casually. Come on, the requirements over there can't be too high. Do you think everyone is like us, passing through a simple trial? In fact, it's already very good to be able to join the First Army. My cousin wants to join, but he can't. But Princess Tilly is there. This sentence caused a moment of silence. Even Fishball could not help but think of Iron Axe and Her Highness Tilly. The result of such a comparison was self-evident. Shut up, all of you. He expelled this inexplicable lost thought from his mind and scolded angrily. The Empty Night can indeed compete with the demons, but only we can protect the people. The demons may come again later. Pay attention to the Sentinel's signal. Yes. Probably realizing that there was no comparison between the two, everyone quickly changed the topic. Captain. Hansen walked over with a gun in his hand. Just now, my men reported that there's a steep slope in the west with a good view. We can monitor the enemy's movements, and it won't be easy for them to climb to the top of the slope. As long as we set up a machine gun, we can suppress those stone crawlers. At least there were still reliable people in the team. Fishball looked in the direction he pointed and quickly made a decision. I'll take 5 people there, and leave the front line to you. I think you should know when to retreat and when to fight. You want to go there yourself? It's our first time here. I can only rest assured if I watch it myself. The flanks were often more important than the front line. Moreover, he knew the vice-captain's character very well. Hansen, who had excellent marksmanship, was steady and cautious, and was more than enough to control the line of defense. I understand. Hansen saluted in acknowledgement of the order. Fishball nodded and quickly picked out the 5 soldiers, including the scout, and climbed all the way to the top of the slope. This bulging area resembled the northbound slope. It rose slowly and then stopped abruptly, forming a section with a height difference of 20 to 30 meters. The top of the slope was densely covered with trees, making it very suitable for hiding. The only drawback was that the fog was also very thick. The red mist that had settled here was difficult to move, so the visibility in the forest was poor. Although it did not affect their observation, being surrounded by the moist red mist was not a good experience. Light a fire to disperse the fog and check the surroundings. Fishball found a suitable shooting position and put down his machine gun. This was a good place. The protruding slope was a natural suppression point, especially against the monstrous beasts that were almost defenseless behind them. While the enemy had not launched a new attack, he planned to mark this point on the map. It might come in handy in the future. But a long time after his teammates had dispersed, Fishball did not hear the crackling sound of burning as he expected. What's going on? Collecting a bunch of firewood shouldn't take that long, right? He furrowed his brows and shouted twice, but the forest was silent. There was not even the slightest echo. Fishball was instantly alerted. This isn't right. Even if there's an enemy, His teammates should be able to fire at least once. Moreover, neither Hansen's subordinates nor the 6 of them had discovered any traces of the enemy along the way. This sudden silence was a little too strange. At this moment he suddenly heard an extremely faint sha-sha sound from his right, as if something was lightly stepping on the grass. Fishball turned around abruptly and raised his machine gun. A dark shadow flashed in front of him, and the cold light even made him feel a stab of pain on his cheek. Kacha! His hands suddenly lightened as the machine gun was split into 2 and fell to the ground. An extremely tall woman appeared in front of him. Her skin was azure blue, and she was barefooted. She wore extremely thin clothes, and other than the long hilted sword in her hand, there was no other metal on her. Perhaps this was the reason why she was able to move so stealthily. It's over. That was the only thought that flashed through Fishball's mind. A humanoid was a characteristic of a senior demon. According to the brochure, the more humanoid a demon was, the stronger it was. Apart from her height and skin color, there was almost no difference in her facial features. One could imagine her strength. Surprisingly, when he was about to die, he did not feel afraid. The only thing on his mind was how to let his teammates know that a senior demon had infiltrated this area. But the sword did not strike his body. The other party took out a piece of paper and threw it in front of him. Take this and bring it back. Hand it over to the 3 chiefs of witches. Her tone was strange and she did not speak fluently, but it was indeed human language. I don't know who the 3 chiefs of witches are. Fishball quietly reached for the gun at his waist. And I'll never give it to the enemy. Give it to your companions and they won't die. The demon's words made his hand stop abruptly. The 3 chiefs are the commanders. Take it back and someone will know. Then, a purple magic door appeared behind her. It slowly retreated into the door, and soon disappeared without a trace along with the door. Chapter 1434. Is this a dream? Fishball blinked. Not only did the senior demon not kill him, it even wanted to communicate with the witch commander, but the piece of paper and the broken spear in front of him told him that it was not a hallucination. He picked up the piece of paper. It was not wrapped in any leather, nor was it stamped with a wax seal. The contents were laid bare for all to see. Even though he knew that he should not look at it, he could not help but steal a few glances. Bottomless land? Deity of gods? I have no idea what it means. This made Fishball heave a sigh of relief. Just from the words, no one would have guessed that the letter was written by a demon. Right, the others? He suddenly realized that it was not the time to ponder over the letter itself. He still had a few teammates missing. Fuck. Cardi. Blanket. Fishball yelled as he stumbled into the forest. He did not feel it when he first saw the senior demon, but now that the danger was over he suddenly realized that his legs were extremely sore, and he could only hold on to the tree trunk to stabilize himself. A moment later, a teammate's weak reply came from the forest. Captain, is that you? After a round of searching, the team that set off found a total of 4 people. The remaining 2 were nowhere to be seen, as though they had vanished. The piece of paper was quickly handed over to a superior officer. Just 3 days later, Fishball received an order to head to the city of Glow to meet His Majesty. And the ship in charge of the transfer was actually the Seagull. He had a faint feeling that the matter was not as simple as a letter. What's the outcome? Roland asked Nightingale after the interrogation. It's the truth, your soldiers did not lie. Nightingale shrugged. Is that so? Honestly speaking, Roland felt that it was unlikely for the frontline soldiers to fabricate a story, but the situation was unique, and it was never wrong to be cautious. After all, the matter was extremely strange and inconceivable to him. Then I will enter the dream world. I'll have to trouble you to take care of me. I will, even if you don't ask. Nightingale turned around and drew the curtains, causing the light in the study to dim down. You're going to see that demon again? As a witch who always stayed by his side, it was difficult to hide secrets from Nightingale. She was also the only one who knew who wrote the secret letter. Even if he did not take the initiative to mention it, as long as he listened to the conversation between him and the ancient witches, he would naturally understand. Of course, Roland had no intention of deliberately hiding it. The reason why he did not reveal it to more people was to avoid unnecessary worry, especially to Anna. Without a doubt, the previous letters are no longer valid. Haxord has returned. And there's another powerful senior demon on the battlefield. You've seen how much trouble the First Army will be in if the two of them join forces. I have to figure out their intentions before that, and for this, neither the Tequila Witches nor Edith can provide much help. It could be said that it was troubled times. Neverwinter was under attack, and the crisis was far from over. Now there was another matter that had to be dealt with first. That being said, it's still a demon. Don't believe it easily, Nightingale warned. And take a few more God's punishment witches with you, especially Ling. You may not believe it, but I'm very good at fighting in the dream world. Roland looked at the woman who seemed to be hidden in the darkness and slowly lay down on the soft couch. But don't worry, I'll take a few more people with me. Go and come back soon. Okay, see you later. He closed his eyes and let sleep engulf him. Half an hour later, Roland met Vaucries at the Rose Café and told her what had happened to Fishball. I see. Vaucries stirred the coffee and pondered for a long time before she said, They're looking for me. Roland did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that Vaucries was acting more and more like a human. They? You know the other person's identity? Vaucries raised her head and swept a glance at him. Soraka's, the silent disaster that I previously mentioned. But she rarely takes off that heavy armor, so it's not strange for you to mistake her for another higher ascendant. Roland was momentarily speechless. He obviously knew of the silent disaster. Back when the deity of gods entered the impassable mountain range, Sylvie had noticed the senior Lord-level demon. He had also gathered information from the front lines and confirmed the other party's identity with Vaucries, the rare Sharita of the demon race, an extremely talented berserk demon warrior, and the former guardian of the legacy shard. Under the guidance of the shard, he had even come into close contact with the other party. That's right, the armored enemy sitting high on the black stone throne was the senior Lord Silent Disaster. But he never expected that the other party's true appearance hidden behind the armor would be like this. Are you sure they're looking for you? Roland suppressed the shock in his heart. But this letter is to be handed to the 3 chiefs of witches. The contents of the letter were extremely simple, almost identical to the one that the Nightmare Lord had handed over. The only difference was that the demon characters had been replaced with human characters. This was also something that he could not understand. Even if the witch commander knew of this matter, what meaning did it have to them? It's normal for you not to understand, because you're not us. Vaucries put down her spoon and drank a mouthful of coffee. Actually, as long as you look at it from another angle, you can guess their intentions. Firstly, I went missing because I was searching for the reason for human evolution. If I'm still alive, then I must be relying on someone's realm of consciousness to survive. Otherwise, under the assault of the sea of consciousness, it's impossible for me to maintain myself until now, much less transmit information. And the one most likely to come into contact with the realm of mind is the witches. Roland asked. Of course, there's also you. Vaucries said frankly. But considering that I can still transmit information, the probability of it being a witch is higher. Haxord speculated that I might have convinced a witch and reached a consensus with her, which was why the first note appeared. If the one I convinced was you, then I could have just led the humans to surrender. There would have been no need to go through so much trouble. What you're actually trying to say is control, right? Don't mind the details. Vaucries did not refute. In a sense, a relationship formed by persuasion is stronger than a relationship formed by control, because the latter is a unilateral action, while the former is a result of both parties' common beliefs. Roland suddenly remembered Agatha's words. During the first battle of divine will, some humans became devil worshippers. He shook his head and shifted his train of thought back to the right track. But even so, they have no way of knowing which witch's realm of consciousness you are relying on. Indeed. But it's not easy to send a note from Grey Castle to the Kingdom of Wolfheart, especially during a time of war. The one who can do it is definitely not a nobody. She should have a certain level of influence in the human kingdom, or be very well informed. So giving the letter to the witch leader is the most convenient choice. This matter will definitely attract the attention of the higher-ups, and the sender will know. Valkyries paused. Also, don't you think this letter is too simple? Because it doesn't even have a cover, many people will peep at its contents along the way. This way, even if the three chiefs decide to hide the truth, the witch I convince will find out what's written in the letter through other channels. And once she finds out, I will know very quickly. Roland suddenly understood. So the letter itself was not the main point. The act of sending the letter was the signal sent by Sky and Silent Disaster. Compared to the contents of the letter, it was difficult to completely conceal the fact that a senior demon had sent a message to a human for the first time. He believed that in the past few days, Fishball's encounter must have spread among the troops in the northern part of the Kingdom of Dawn. I admit that this requires a certain amount of luck, but I have to say that this is the best choice they could have thought of. Similarly, their luck isn't too bad. Valkyries pointed at Roland and then at herself. You see, don't I know now? Chapter 1435. To be honest, I don't know. Valkyries did not evade his gaze. This is different from what I expected. That's what you are concerned about, right? Roland tacitly acknowledged his words. He had already realized that the Nightmare Lord had an indescribable insight into the human heart. Even in the Martialist Association, he was rather popular and could be said to be doing very well. In front of such a person, feigning ignorance was useless. Being direct was the most effective method of negotiation. According to Valkyrie's previous judgment, the appearance of the deity of gods meant that the Sky Lord had made up his mind. Since he had spoken to the king, he had basically severed all possibilities of roping him in. Unless the floating island was destroyed, there was no way he would turn back. Logically speaking, the paranoid hacksword will always be secretly observing the situation at the front lines. Before you display sufficient strength, he will not take action. Valkyrie seemed to be muttering to himself, but it also seemed to be expressing the suspicions in his heart. Now that he is acting out of his usual self and has even reached a consensus with Sarakas, it's not strange for you to be wary. But what? What if the situation changes? Valkyrie spread his hands. The affairs of the world are unpredictable. No matter how appropriate the decision is, it will become meaningless without the corresponding conditions. I can only guess that there might be other factors that caused Hacksword to change his original intentions. But you don't know what it is. That's right. Even you don't know, much less me. Valkyries drank another mouthful of coffee. If I don't ask, I won't be able to guess anything. So you want to write a letter again? That is indeed a method, but from the time of suspicion to contact, I'm afraid it will take a long time. And at this moment, the conditions will change. These uncertain factors will bring about uncertain risks. Roland remained silent for a moment, then looked at Valkyries with a teasing look. Are you trying to lead me? The decision is ultimately in your hands. The latter's expression was surprisingly calm. Roland did not immediately answer. He shrugged and changed the topic. By the way, why did you only talk about Hacksword and barely mention Silent Disaster? Can't it be part of the other factors? Because I understand it. Valkyrie suddenly sighed and looked out of the window. I need a lot of reasons to convince Hacksword, but I don't. As long as it knows that I'm still alive, it definitely won't stand idly by. Deity of gods, at the bottom of the red mist pond. Does this really work? Silent Disaster stared at Sky Lord, who was resting in the pool with his eyes closed. Maybe not. After a few days of rest, Hacksword had recovered quite a bit. But since you can't think of a better solution, we can only try our luck. He knew that in order to get Silent Disaster to stand firmly on his side, he had to first resolve the two reasons Silent Disaster gave for refusing. The king had ordered the execution of Plan B, and he was powerless to reverse it, nor did he dare to openly question the king's strategy. Therefore, the only breakthrough point was Valkyrie's letter. A piece of paper and a few words were too hasty, but what about more words and information? If he could successfully communicate with the Nightmare Lord, Silent Disaster would definitely become the most powerful card in his hand. For this plan, not only did Hacksword get his right-hand man, Siases, to personally monitor the transmission point in the northern part of the Kingdom of Dawn, he also sent 2 groups of nobles to the foot of Mount Hermes and the Everwinter border. He did not wish to miss out on any possible response. Such an uncertain method of fishing for fish in the sea added more uncertainty to a plan that required luck, but Hacksword had no other choice. He could not expose the existence of the witch to prevent Valkyries from losing their connection and becoming completely lost in the realm of mind. He also could not set up a location to wait for a reply and give the humans a chance to lay an ambush. But he had no idea what the final outcome would be. After all, the transmission of information required time, and the second deity of gods that the king was driving towards the fertile plains day and night. Once Plan B was activated, there would be no turning back. Also, rather than worrying about this, why don't you pay more attention to Mask? What's wrong with Mask? Silent Disaster frowned. I don't know. I just feel that his reaction is a little strange. Hacksword shook his head. Since he had returned, there was no way he could hide it from Mask. But Mask, who had taken over the Western Front army, did not seem to mind Hacksword's prolonged disappearance, and did not suggest for him to take the initiative to report to the king. In the past, Mask would not have let go of such an opportunity to suppress him. Lord Sky Lord. At this moment, Siases suddenly walked into the grotto. There's movement from the humans. So fast. Hacksword could not help but be surprised. What did you observe? He did not reveal his thoughts to anyone other than Silent Disaster, not even Siases. Thus, he gave his subordinates an order to report any abnormal movements to him. A male has erected a flag on the hillside that you requested to monitor, but he does not have any of his brethren by his side. Erecting a flag without occupying it was extremely abnormal in itself. Hacksword could not help but exchange glances with Silent Disaster. It had only been 5 to 6 days since he sent out the message. It was a far cry from the half a month he had expected. This could only mean one thing. Not only was the witch in a high position, she was also close to the pinnacle of power. Otherwise, she would not have such an efficient response. Did the Eye Demon discover anything? Although witches were unable to enter the Red Mist region, he still assigned Siases a symbiotic Eye Demon just in case. The long-range attack from the blonde witch's sudden appearance still left a lingering fear in Skylord's heart. What we sensed are basically all non-magical males. It should be a routine investigation by the humans. We have yet to discover the existence of magic power observers. Siases hesitated. My lord, what are you guarding against? I will tell you when there are results. After Siases left, Hacksword looked at Silent Disaster. Do you want to go? Is there a need to ask? The latter had already put on her helmet. Passing through the distortion door, Silent Disaster slowly walked towards the soldier under the flag. This time, she did not deliberately hide herself. The soldier quickly noticed the commotion behind her and turned around. Silent Disaster recognized the male. He was the one who had been delivered a letter previously. This was undoubtedly an extremely unusual meeting. The human did not scream, flee, or fight back. Instead, he quietly waited for her to approach. Although his breathing was obviously chaotic, he did not take a single step back. Only when the two of them faced each other did the soldier speak. I've delivered the letter. Where are my companions? They are still alive. Go back and I will release them. The soldier nodded, took out a new piece of paper, and handed it to Silent Disaster. Silent Disaster's pupils suddenly constricted. It was still written in her race's language, and it had an obvious nightmare style. However, the content was exceptionally short. There was only one sentence. Concentrate and close your eyes. Chapter 1436. Enter the realm of mind here? Silent Disaster was shocked. She was not Hacksword. After leaving the birth tower, it would be difficult for her to establish a connection with the realm of mind. Even if she could touch the origin of magic for a short period of time, she would not be able to find Valkyries in the dark. So why did the Nightmare Lord send this message? She looked around. The entire slope was silent. The Eye Demon did not give any warning. Even the hands of the soldier standing in front of her were empty. He did not even carry the firearms that they were so proud of. Then, I'll give it a try. If I can't succeed, it won't be too late to discuss it with Hacksword. Thinking of this, Silent Disaster slowly closed her eyes and tried to sense the extremely minute undulation. At this moment, an extremely powerful force enveloped her. It was so shocked that it wanted to break free, but it was completely powerless. The barrier between the two worlds, which was originally like a quagmire, had become as light as a bubble. Almost effortlessly, it connected to the realm of mind. Even with her eyes closed, she could feel the surging magic around her. This was something Silent Disaster had never experienced before. Even meditating while leaning against the birth tower would not have such an effect. She even had the illusion that she was ushering in a new advancement. All these feelings happened in an instant. Before she could think further, everything had calmed down. But it was not true calmness. Silent Disaster felt a slight buzzing sound in front of her. At the same time, there was a gentle breeze. The wind was very dry and calm. There were almost no changes in its size. It couldn't find any corresponding scene in its hundreds of years of memories. Silent Disaster slowly opened her eyes. She found herself in a narrow house. Although the lighting in the house was poor, it was not dark. The huge stone of lighting above her head was emitting a bright white light, illuminating every corner of the house. The source of the sound and the warm breeze was a strange thing on the wall. It was neither wood nor metal. The material seemed to be somewhere in between. But the texture of the air vent was astonishingly exquisite. Is this the realm of mind? Why have I never seen this thing before? It's the one looking for you? An unfamiliar voice suddenly sounded behind her. Silent Disaster reached for her sword and turned around at the same time. Long time no see, Sarakas. It froze on the spot. That wasn't a reunion after being separated for a long time. In the Red Mist Pond, it would see each other every day, but only at this moment did it truly understand the difference between the two of them. That slight smile, that vivid and lively gaze, and that extremely familiar voice. Every single detail set off indescribable waves in its heart. Lord Valkyries. What a nostalgic way of calling it. Nightmare smiled. But now that you're a great dark monarch, you're on the same level as me. There's no need to use the honorific you used to. What's going on? Sarakas suddenly stopped because she saw the male beside Nightmare Shapeshifter. In the divine realm, it was this dangerous human who attacked it with a cold expression. So it was this guy who imprisoned you? Do you think so? Valkyries asked.
Oh.
Silent Disaster's hand gripped the hilt of her sword, but she found it difficult to pull it out. Indeed, not only did the two of them appear at the same time, they didn't seem to be enemies either. Could it be that he was the one convinced by Nightmare Shapeshifter? Welcome to the dream world. Let me introduce myself. I'm the King of Grey Castle and the leader of the Witch Union, Roland Wimbledon. The other party shrugged. You know how to speak my race's language? Silent Disaster said in disbelief. Listen again? Roland repeated in a slow voice. Only then did she realize that it wasn't the common language of the human kingdom, nor was it the language of her race. Instead, it was an extremely strange language. Yet she could understand it. In other words, regardless of what language the three of them spoke, they could understand each other. You can treat it as an exchange of consciousness. Anyway, these are all minor details. Roland gestured for her to eat. To be honest, it's not easy to facilitate such a meeting. So we should make the best use of our time and focus on the urgent problem. Come, let's sit down and talk while we eat. Talk while we eat. What an idiot. Could it be that he doesn't know that eating and drinking are utterly unnecessary things for high-level cultivators to do? Valkyries must have tolerated him for a long time. However, Silent Disaster saw Nightmare Sovereign happily sit by the table and raise an exquisite porcelain cup in front of her. She sat down in a daze. Even though time is tight, if we don't even have the most basic trust, there's nothing to talk about. Roland went straight to the point. And I'm afraid it won't be easy to make you believe me in a short period of time. So, Valkyries will be responsible for answering your questions. That's for the best. Valkyries gave Roland a meaningful look. I also happen to have many questions to ask her. Following that, Nightmare Lord briefly explained how she entered the dream world, and what she saw and heard. In between, she did not neglect to mention the situation on the Western Front. Silent Disaster finally knew what had happened after she was lost in the sea of consciousness, but that was all she knew. Everything was too inconceivable. She really could not understand why a male human without any magic power would be favored by the realm of mind. So, this is the origin of the new human inheritance? Silent Disaster opened her mouth with difficulty. You can understand it that way, Roland replied. But I prefer to treat it as a complete world. A world that is facing the threat of God and is in imminent danger, just like us. She was unwilling to believe any human, but there were some things that she had to believe, such as this realm of consciousness that was known as the dream world. Looking out from the window, she discovered that it was shockingly huge. It was actually impossible to see the end of it. Putting aside the question of whether God really wanted to destroy this place, just from the scope alone, it was far beyond the king's presiding holy see. There were also the nameless furnishings and tools. All of them had a common characteristic, which was that they were unbelievably exquisite. To be able to spend so much effort on such daily items, it was evident how astonishing the power contained within was. If humans were borrowing this power, it was not strange for the huge changes that occurred in the third battle of divine will. Of course, the most important one was Valkyrie's. Her vision and train of thought far surpassed Klein's. If she did not raise any objections on the spot, it was already very convincing. But it was too difficult for Sarakas to absorb all the information in a short period of time. By the way, I would like to know what made Haxord decide to contact Valkyries directly and not continue waiting? Roland took the initiative to ask when he saw that she did not speak for a long time. This does not match her style. Silent Disaster first glanced at Valkyries, and only revealed the reason after it nodded. Roland was not surprised that Sky Lord had confirmed the existence of the bottomless land at the northern end of the Land of Dawn. He had long learned of this information from Joan, and now that he thought about it, it was normal for Haxord to verify this information. But the second piece of information was completely different. Are you saying that the Blackstone region has been invaded by the Skysea realm? Valkyries revealed a look of shock. Isn't that the main defensive line of the race? Chapter 1437. Can you explain in more detail? Roland pressed. There's nothing much to say. Silent Disaster was clearly wary of the human king. You know very little about the Skysea realm. You wouldn't understand even if I told you. That was indeed the case in the past, but it's different now. Grey Castle's western border is being attacked by demonic beasts, and one of them is the Skysea realm. Roland did not care about its tone. Instead, he carefully described the skeleton monster that had climbed onto the land. This is the first time we've seen it outside the sea. Tell him what he wants to know, Valkyries said slowly. Regardless, it's better than letting the legacy shard of humanity fall into the hands of the Skysea realm. Since you say so. Sarakas nodded helplessly. Listen up, human. The thing you see is called a nest mother. They are also the core of the Skysea realm's expansion. A nest mother isn't strong in combat, but it can control many subordinates to fight for it. Like a brain? You can describe it that way, but don't interrupt me next time, Silent Disaster said impatiently. Silent Disaster said impatiently. These creatures are much more ancient than you imagine. Perhaps they have existed since the birth of this world. However, the long passage of time has little effect on them. The changes in their shape and abilities were very stable until the recent few months. After a series of explanations, Roland finally understood the reason for the Skysea realm's abnormal behavior. According to the demons, they could evolve, but it was different from the ordinary evolution of abilities. Every change in the Skysea realm would affect the entire race. For example, a nest was a nest and a blade was a blade. There would not be any obvious differences between the individuals, unlike humans and demons, where each individual was relatively independent. It was probably because of this reason that their evolution was extremely slow. They would only notice a slight difference every few centuries. But the recent changes proved that this idea was completely wrong. No one knew how many times the Sky Sea realm had evolved in the past few months. The only thing they could confirm was that their strength had increased at an astonishing rate. For example, the blade beasts had previously been the helpers of the nest mothers when they hunted. As long as their positions were locked on, even berserk demons would be able to tear them apart. But now, not only had their size increased by several times, their strength, endurance, and reaction speed had also greatly increased. Their magic-filled scythe claws could even threaten greater demons. Even in a head-on confrontation, higher ascendants could easily kill a blade beast, but the problem was that the Sky Sea realm's evolution was universal. It was just like when a witch awakened to become a transcendent, other witches would also become a transcendent. As long as there were enough of them, a quantitative change could easily lead to a qualitative change. The defensive line that the devils had barely managed to maintain was no longer able to withstand the invasion of the Sky Sea realm. Countless enemies crawled out of the sea, crashing onto the battlefield like a tidal wave. The king had no choice but to make the decision to abandon the Blackstone region. This was definitely not good news for Roland. If the demons were really unable to maintain their territory, then the humans would have to take on this new pressure. The attack on the western region was just the beginning. Humans, I suggest that you immediately transfer the legacy shard. Silent Disaster finally said, with your present strength, it will be very difficult for you to face the Sky Sea realm's army head-on. Valkyries is right. Allowing the Sky Sea realm to obtain the shard is something we absolutely cannot accept. I have no intention of giving the shard to them. Roland shrugged. Besides, don't you find the timing of this evolution a little too coincidental? Oh, Valkyries crossed her legs. Tell me about it. The Blackstone region has always been fighting with the Sky Sea realm, so the estimation of the timing of the evolution shouldn't be too far off. And 3 to 4 months ago was about the time when the oracles ambushed Zero. You suspect that the Sky Sea realm's rapid evolution is related to God? It's just a guess. Roland muttered. But there's something I'm very concerned about. Have you spoken to the Sky Sea realm before? Valkyrie's expression gradually turned solemn. I don't think so, but the other participants of the Battle of Divine will have spoken to each other, Roland said slowly. There was no need to talk about humans and demons. They had even coexisted during the Cloud School of Thought. And the destroyed underground civilization had once contacted the Witch Alliance before it was destroyed, which resulted in the God's Punishment Army plan. He believed that the other party's experience was similar. This could be seen from the Nightmare Lord's expression. Only the Sky Sea realm was an exception. There were no records of them in history. If humans rarely ventured into the depths of the sea, it would be very strange if the demons did not have such experiences. After all, communication was a common trait of civilizations, even if they were mortal enemies. Now, it seemed like it was a silent one that drifted away from the three races. Following this train of thought, the reason behind the Sky Sea realm's evolution made one shudder. What do you plan on doing next? Valkyries asked. Heading to the bottomless land before it's too late. Roland looked at the duo. I hope that you can stop all your offensive operations and focus your strength on dealing with the Sky Sea realm. That's impossible. Silent Disaster straightforwardly rejected. Ignoring the fact that God and Divine Will's deception is just your one-sided statement, the current Western Front Army commander is masked, and the symbiote is under his control. Furthermore what? Sarakas did not answer directly, but remained silent for a moment. I wish to speak to Valkyries alone. Phew. Roland exhaled lightly. All right, but don't forget about the time. Silent Disaster left the room under Valkyries' guidance and walked along the corridor of the apartment. From this angle, an indescribably magnificent city appeared before Sarakas' eyes. The gray, cube-like buildings rose and fell one after another. They were in no way inferior to the Birth Tower, but their numbers were several orders of magnitude higher. They followed the crisscrossing paths and extended outwards, as though there was no end to them. Even the deity of gods was unable to contain so many majestic creations. The intense impact caused her breathing to turn sluggish. The The glimpse from the window had left Saraka's in shock, but the scene after walking out of the room far exceeded her imagination. What was even more inconceivable was the numerous figures walking in the city. They did not look like magic users that had been sucked in, nor were they inanimate objects created by the realm of consciousness. This was also the greatest difference between this place and the presiding Holy See. It was no wonder that human called it the world. Let's stop here. Valkyrie stopped in her tracks. The voice broke Silent Disaster's train of thought. She forced herself to focus and carefully sensed for a moment before speaking. There are other magic power users in the room. I know they're witches, Valkyrie said indifferently. Her reaction was out of Saraka's expectations. You already knew? While waiting for you, I had a simple chat with them, although they still don't like me. Nightmare Lord nodded. The witch's main goal is to protect Roland, but in fact he doesn't need protection. She did it to reassure everyone. Even a transcendent would not be so relaxed in front of a senior lord. What more a mortal male? Silent Disaster realized that the news was as shocking as the Battle of Divine Will being a scam. What else do you think? If he was so easy to deal with, I would have done it a long time ago. Valkyrie paused and seemed to sigh. Of course, that was my initial thought. The witches didn't follow us. Saraka's grabbed her hand. Tell me, how can I bring you out of the realm of mind? Valkyrie looked at her for a moment before shaking her head. Haven't you realized? I can't leave this place anymore. No, since I can enter, you can definitely leave. Right. If I take your body with me. Nightmare Lord extended her hand and brushed aside the hair on her forehead. This action made Silent Disaster widen her eyes. Lord Valkyrie's your magic stone. Chapter 1438. Saraka stared at her in a daze for a moment. If this male named Roland Wimbledon were to die, I would probably cease to exist as well. Valkyrie's tone was not heavy at all. But compared to the entire race, my personal fate is not worth mentioning. If killing him would allow the continuation of the race, you must not hesitate. Silent Disaster did not continue the topic. She turned to look at the bustling street below the building. There were not only humans, but also a few figures that resembled junior demons. They shuttled through the crowd and blended into their surroundings. Such a scene was inconceivable no matter how one looked at it. After a while she asked again, "Do you trust that male?" To be honest, when it comes to the survival of the race, the word trust is too weak. Valkyrie leaned over the railing. Even if you are the negotiator, I cannot act based on trust alone. But he was right about one thing. Trust is the foundation of change. Without this foundation, we may need decades or even centuries to change our fixed views on the battle of divine will. And this price may be far beyond the ability of our race to bear. So whether it is a yes or no answer, it is not appropriate. From the looks of it, he is indeed working towards ending the battle of divine will. The changes in the battle situation that he told me were not lies either. Putting everything together, this bit of trust is not an unreasonable request, Nightmare Lord said softly. There is never a lack of reason to doubt. The key is to weigh the pros and cons. Weigh the pros and cons. Silent Disaster repeated. Then what should I do next? That will depend on yourself. I have said before, you are already a qualified senior lord. I do not wish to affect your judgment. In the future, will I only be able to see you here? Saraka asked hesitantly. Not necessarily. Valkyrie shrugged. I heard from Roland that he is trying to save a witch named Ashes. If the information that the oracle revealed is correct, even if her body perishes, as long as there are traces left in the realm of mind, there is still a chance of survival. Compared to the witches floating in the sea of mind, I am at least more complete. Oh right. As it said that, it reached out its hands and took off her helmet. Considering the risk, there won't be many chances for us to meet like this, so don't wrap yourself up too tightly. Compared to the pitch-black armor, I'd rather see your original appearance. When the two of them returned to the living room, Roland could not help but raise his eyebrows. Even though he had learned from Fishball's report that Silent Disaster's main body was vastly different from her usual combat readiness, He was still surprised to see it with his own eyes. If he had not been prepared, it would have been difficult for him to associate the burly and hideous armor with the female demon inside. Are you done talking? What's the conclusion? I want to ask a question, human. Saraka's asked coldly. If the battle of divine will is really a scam, how confident are you in defeating the gods? Actually, I don't know. This was also a question that Roland often asked himself. What is God? What is its purpose? How should I fight? Even if I have the chance to fight, these are all unknown. Besides that, based on the abilities it has displayed so far, theoretically speaking, we have no chance. But I believe that regardless of the outcome, it's better than sitting and waiting for death. I don't care about your life or death at all, but don't forget, Lord Valkyries is still in your realm of consciousness. For him, I have to live well too, right? It's good that you understand. Saraka's glared at him. As for your request, I'll have to consider it before making a decision. I don't expect a single negotiation to yield results. Roland nodded. But at least it's a breakthrough from nothing. After that, we'll contact each other through letters. After all, such a meeting is extremely risky for both parties. As long as the Western Front army is still invading the Four Kingdoms, the war will not stop. Also, he raised his cup. Since the next meeting is so far away, are you sure you don't want a drink? Umph. Saraka's disdainfully picked up the drink on the table and poured it into her mouth. She had seen too many of such tricks. No matter how disgusting the drink was, she would not show any fear in front of the enemy. When a mellow and sweet feeling that she had never experienced flowed into her throat, the entire room suddenly disappeared as she returned to the forest. Silent Disaster subconsciously looked at where Valkyries was sitting, but all she saw was an empty patch of grass. This short scene was like an illusion, and only a wisp of sweetness lingered in her mouth. What took you so long? Upon seeing Silent Disaster appear, Hacksword did not hesitate to expel several distortion doors, and only asked after pulling her more than 5 kilometers away. From his point of view, she should have left the area immediately after receiving the reply. They didn't reply to my letter. Silent Disaster seemed to be absent-minded. What? Skylord frowned. Could it be a trap? No, I saw Valkyries. Hacksword nearly missed a step and fell from the sky. What did you say? Valkyries is indeed attached to the realm of consciousness. Your guess isn't wrong, Silent Disaster said slowly. But the one that is attached to is the King of Grey Castle, and also the possessor of the Legacy Shard. After returning to the deity of gods and listening to Saraka's recount, Hacksword fell into an extreme state of confusion. The massive amount of information nearly clogged up his brain. Although he expected Valkyries to have found something, he never expected the humans to have penetrated so deeply. Furthermore, in a certain sense, the Nightmare Lord had already formed a cooperative relationship with them. If this news were to spread, it would change the history of their race for close to 1,000 years. It would also cause them to stand against the king. Should I try to convince the king? Hacksword immediately dispelled that thought. He was unwilling to enter the presiding Holy See no matter what. Otherwise, if the king wanted to do something to him, he would not even have the chance to refuse. Then should I stand on Valkyries' side? In fact, Nightmare Lord was a candidate to become the king from the very beginning. In essence, the difference between the king and the senior lord was not in terms of ability. To become the king, one had to pay a certain price, and it depended on the individual's choice. Therefore, this thought was not obstructed by his dignity. The only thing that made him hesitate was the fact that he was a human of a different race. Regardless of whether the Battle of Divine Will was a scam, the Legacy Shard's enhancement to the race was real. With the aid of the unknown legacy, the humans were improving rapidly. If a conflict were to arise in the future, what would happen to the race? These doubts made it hard for him to make a decision. What Hacksword did not notice was that while he was deep in thought, Silent Disaster had already put on her helmet, picked up her sword, and silently left the Red Mist room. Chapter 1439. Let Go of the Witch has no updates today. Currently typing. Please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.